happening, and it freaks me out.
Oh, it's stone gas, man.
Hello, and welcome to episode number 16 of Region Free. How's everybody doing tonight? I'm, of course, your host and moderator, Pizzell. Hope you all are doing well on this Thursday. Before we get started here, I want to remind everybody of our Patreon. If you like the show and you want to show a little bit extra support, head over to our Patreon. It's in the description. There are hours and hours of exclusive content over there. So, go over and check it out and become a Regionaire today. All right, without further ado, let me introduce my panel for tonight. First up, the legendary B-Movie Mike. What's going on, Mike?
What's up, everybody? How's it going?
How you doing, man?
Doing great. Ready for the show. Going to be kick-ass as always.
Very cool. Very cool. Also with me tonight from the Flesh Wound Features YouTube channel, Dan. Shine on, you crazy diamond. What's going on, Dan?
Nothing much, Piz. How are you doing?
Doing very, very well. How's everything going?
It's going great. I'm excited for tonight's show. We've got some great topics.
Absolutely, we do. We do. And just to let you know, Dan.
Oh.
I did watch this last night. No, not before last. And I enhanced it with some wine. And just about got through the whole bottle. It's everything that you made it out to be, Dan. Everything that you made it out to be.
I am glad to hear that, and I really look forward to your review.
Yes, it's going to be. I may have to drink a few bottles of wine before that review to go into it in the right frame of mind. So we'll see. But good to have you back, Dan. Also with me tonight, I've got Stone Gas Man. What's going on, Stone?
Live from New York, it's Stone Gas Man. How's everybody tonight? Very excited about tonight's topics.
Very cool. Very cool. How's everything going in the Big Apple?
It's getting really crowded again. I mean, on the subways, just everywhere you go. Oh my God, everybody's out now. And a lot of people are starting to take off their masks. I won't take off my mask for a while, at least. Maybe for another year or so. We'll see, because I'm perfectly comfortable with mine. But otherwise, work is going great. Yeah, can't complain.
Good.
Everything's good.
Cool. Very cool. Cool. Also with me tonight, Cam from Obnoxious and Anonymous.
2 shows in a row. There must be something happening in my life. Good. And Stone, I have to say, you like you're in the room where Joaquin Phoenix was selling all those bootlegs in 8mm. Are you in Scalper's Row or what? So I'm very excited to be here. So and
good to see you. Yeah, good to have you here for 2 weeks in a row, man.
I know. And then I was able to show up on Lauren's stream last night. So so yeah, it's good.
Cool. Very cool. And lastly, but not leastly, we have got Lauren. What's going on, Lauren?
Breaking hearts and minds and community guidelines. How are you there, sir?
I'm doing very well. Doing very well. You?
Well, it's been a very eventful week. I got my second dose of the Moderna vaccine and felt pretty good about the whole experience until 7 o'clock at night when it tried to kill me.
Wow.
Yeah.
So yeah, definitely bigger than a bread truck hitting you. Maybe not quite a concrete truck, but pretty intense 24, 26 hours or so. Definitely without sleep. So I'm glad I'm through it, and I'm glad that maybe I did my small part to get back to a normal world, because I have a very different take on this than Stone does. I just want normality back. I just don't care. Put 7 more vials of whatever you want in me, as long as I can walk the streets.
Well, that's what the nurses told me. They said, get ready for that yearly booster for a while, and I said, all right. Well,
yeah. I mean, whatever. I just want. I want a world where people communicate again, and at least nod that little ridiculously manly nod at each other when you walk down the street, rather than everyone treating everyone like you're Renfield and you just saw Dracula.
Can we have it all come back though?
The manly nod is coming back. Everybody I see, I just go,
yeah.
Just,
But can we?
It's really only half a nod. Yeah, it's just up. There's no down to it. It's just,
there's no down to it.
Can we have it all come back though? Can we have bookstores and and record stores come back too?
There might be an opportunity for that, simply because there's going to be a big boom in the economy, simply because there's going to be pent up demand for so many things that people just didn't venture out of the house for. So there may be money on the marketplace for some companies and some individuals who want to roll the die on a business. And if we're out there to support them, maybe we can, on a small scale, get some of that back.
I will say this: I've not been wearing a mask when I go into places here lately, and it feels really good. It feels really freaking good. So,
unfortunately, I still have to wear a mask indoors in stores. Otherwise, Murphy's death troopers come for me. So, but his clock is ticking, so it don't really matter.
Just being able to breathe again, God, it's amazing. In a store.
Being able to breathe real air and not your own,
Yeah.
And my glass is being fogged up constantly. It feels freeing,
I was going to work 2 masks and a face shield, so I look like the exterminator.
Good Lord. Good Lord. Let's dive into some topics here. Probably one of the biggest movies that has come out here recently. Let's talk about Army of the Dead. It was heavily hyped. A lot of people were excited for it. I was excited for it. And has everybody seen Army of the Dead?
Now, were you excited, Piz, because you liked the Dawn of the Dead remake he did?
I liked the Dawn of the Dead remake, and I thought the trailer looked pretty fun. I liked the idea of, the zombies sort of turning Vegas into their own little kingdom. You know what I mean? There were things. I'm just going to say, I thought the movie was awful. I really disliked the movie. I didn't hate it. There were things about it I liked, but all in all, I thought it was one of the laziest, most derivative, predictable, dumb movies I've seen in a long time. Even when you get to the point of and I can turn my mind off and just enjoy wow, that was a cool explosion. I can do that all day. But even turning my mind off for this movie, I was going, God, these characters are dumb. God, I hate that one character. It's because of her everybody's dying. Why? What is? Is it just me, or were there characters in this movie that just disappeared and there was no explanation as to what happened to them? The whole movie is about saving one character, and at the end that character completely disappears. Maybe I blinked and we saw her demise. I don't know. The whole movie's about getting this character, and at the very end of the movie she disappears. What the hell?
Did anybody see the Red Letter Media takedown of it? Because they actually found that one of the cameras that Zack Snyder shot it with had dead pixels in the frame, and so every time he used that camera, you can see it, the dead pixels on the frame. Like they didn't color correct it at all. So.
I've ranted about it. Again, there were things I liked about it. I liked the idea of like you had the two different classes of zombies, and you had the alpha zombies, and I liked the idea of Vegas being their little kingdom, and I dug that. But everything else about it was just so predictable and derivative and just lazy and poorly written. And even the acting I thought was like, I literally was going to do a review of the movie, but I was like, it's sometimes fun to just beat a movie to death with a baseball bat, because some movies deserve it. And this movie kind of does, but I was like, this is just going to be 10 minutes of negativity. I don't want to do that.
And you don't want the Snyder Bros to come after your channel.
Well, look, here's the thing. I've liked most of Zack Snyder's stuff. I've liked more Zack Snyder movies than I've disliked. But I think when you have Zack Snyder needs a writer, because if you look at his track record, his better movies are the ones that he's only directed and not written. The ones where he gets a little to Zack Snyder, he writes them. So there's a pattern here.
And 2.5 hours is ridiculous for this movie. I've compared it to a multi-million-dollar Asylum film, but honest to God, Asylum has made better zombie films than this that are fun and 90 minutes. I was amazed how bad it was, quite frankly. I don't know. I mean, nothing. I can't say one good thing.
Dan, it had to be 2.5 hours because it was patterning itself entirely after Aliens. And Aliens is 2.5 hours.
That is true. That is true. It basically remade it. I know some people have pointed to, I mean, I won't spoil it, but other things other than zombies that were hinted at. I don't care. I honest to God don't care. I know that's like some of the positive reviews, but did you notice this brief flash? I was like, doesn't matter. If you're going to torture me for 2.5 hours, I don't care what else you've got up your sleeve. That movie was garbage.
I've not seen any reviews of it, good or negative, but I'm kind of curious to watch a positive review of it to see like what did they like about the movie.
They liked that actor Tig Notaro, who wasn't even cast in the film. She came in because they had to digitally erase an actor that was problematic. So
which character was she?
She's kind of that butch lady that doesn't give a crap about anything.
Oh, the helicopter pilot.
She's the best part of the film.
She's my favorite character in the movie.
She was completely green screened in the whole movie. She wasn't. She went over another actor.
Yeah.
So. Wow. No idea. I had no idea.
Yeah. I don't think. I mean, she was good. I would have liked more of her. I don't think Chris D'Elia was going to make any difference. I mean, anybody complaining about him not being in there, I seriously doubt he would have added anything but some stupid one-liners. I don't know. How can a movie about a zombie outbreak in Las Vegas be so lame? And I don't quite get the barricades. Those zombies seemed awfully spry, and that wasn't very high.
And how do you build it? That's my big question about the barricade. Is it's 3 shipping containers high?
Yeah.
Okay. So let's say the zombies for whatever reason don't want to leave Vegas. Okay, cool. But you had to somehow construct this border. So you got to think the military went in far enough to beat them back so that you could dump all these container ships around, right? Well, why didn't the military just continue through and just take care of the problem then?
Yeah.
Are you applying logic, Lauren, again?
So, yeah, I am, because the movie is 2.5 hours long, and it takes itself at times really freaking seriously, which for the subject matter is ridiculous. This was so far my least favorite movie-going experience of the year. This is a horrible film. This really is not worth the time or energy people will put into even like pushing the remote control button to watch a streaming version of it. I don't see anyone I can suggest this thing to. I really hated it. I will.
Well,
Piz says he didn't hate it. I hated it.
Oh, well, the more I'm thinking about it now, the more I think I probably did hate it. But there were, like I said, there were a couple things I liked about it. But, you mentioned the barricade. Did you notice when they were going into Vegas, the only thing that was separating the zombies from the people was like a little piece of wood that they propped up against the door. Literally.
Yeah.
That's it. That was it. She lifted a little piece of wood to open the container door, and then they were in Vegas. Wow. These are super zombies, by the way.
Yes.
Little piece of wood.
You know, if it had gone full absurdist, it would have been fine.
Yeah, yes.
But they kept wanting to have emotional stakes, which none of it worked. Because I don't know about you, but I not only did I not care about any characters except for the helicopter pilot, I actively disliked all of them.
The daughter. Oh,
God, she was so bad. Oh,
She's daughter is like not even a character. It's just a plot device that walks around.
yeah, and kills everybody and gets everybody killed.
yeah.
What's the worst decision I can make at this moment?
Exactly. and the movie wants you to like her the most out of everybody.
Jesus Christ.
And
she's the point of view character.
And have you ever seen a movie that had a worse depth of field? I mean, it was like 3 inches away from the person in the front's face. It was out of focus, like the entire movie.
I think that was the idea of hiding the fact that this, for a superstar budget film, was not a huge budget film.
90 million.
Well, for something of this scale and length, that's and by the way, no one works cheap when you're on a Zack Snyder set, right?
Right.
So I think they were just the photography, which was him. He was the director of photography of the thing, which is already a problem because maybe that's where all the attention to normal directing went. But it's bad. It is a bad looking film. It looks digital. Everything looks like it's shot on green screen because, spoilers, it was all shot on green screen. The actors seem I'm not even talking about the helicopter pilot to everyone else. They all seem distanced from each other. Like none of them seem to really be interacting, even when they're 3 feet away and answering each other's questions. It's just very rote and mechanical. The movie, it does not feel like it was made by humans.
Robert brings up an interesting point. I forgot about this. He says, "Did you see the spaceship at the beginning? Wasn't there a spaceship in the beginning? So what was that about? Is the zombie thing like some sort of alien disease, or was the alpha zombie an alien? I mean, what are they trying to say here?
We're gonna get a CGI tiger in space in the sequel, naturally, but
Sequel and prequel anime.
I mean, more power to him, and more power to those who liked it. I mean, I guess we're gonna have a lot more Army of the Dead stuff, and I mean, enjoy it.
Well, guys, I'd like to thank you all for taking a bullet that I was lucky to miss. I don't feel like I missed anything, and I actually feel like my life has been enriched by skipping this experience. At first I thought I'm not really going to have much to add, but anything I would have to add probably wouldn't be positive anyway. So thanks again, though. I appreciate it. You guys are pals.
Mike, if you go on YouTube and just type in best moments of Army of the Dead, watch about 2 minutes, and that's you'll be good.
I mean, there's actually 2 minutes.
There might be 2 minutes in total. But I would also say, check out the Asylum mockbuster, Zombies 3 Aquarium of the Dead. It is, in fact, a better movie. As sad as that sounds.
That's really sad.
Skip this, Mike, and if you've got Shudder, there's a great movie on there now called Sator, Sator. I watched the other night. Really good. Highly recommend it.
I almost checked that out, but I had to watch something else instead. But that definitely looked entertaining. Of course, Psycho Goreman is now available on Shudder, and I'll be checking that out as well. I have that sense of humor, so I'll probably like that one too. But Sator definitely looked interesting. I'm glad I skipped this one though.
You're welcome.
I went to see Spiral instead, and I think I made the right choice.
Did you like?
Oh yeah.
Did you like Spiral?
Yeah, I thought it was pretty good. I mean, I don't hate Saw. I don't love Saw. You know what I mean? I'm kind of in the middle as far as that series goes. But I thought it was pretty good. It was entertaining. I was glad I went to the movies and didn't regret spending the money, and I had a good time. So I thought Chris Rock was good. Samuel L. Jackson's always good, no matter what. Could have been a bigger role, but it was good for what we got. It had its weak moments, but overall, yeah, I liked it.
I was going to say the Alamo Draft House just opened back up here in Brooklyn, and had Army of the Dead opened up this week, I would have went to see it, but instead I went to go see The Warriors, Walter Hill's The Warriors, for the first time on the big screen, and I think that was a hell of a better choice, probably, because 90% of everybody I know said it was bad, except for my boss. I cannot explain that.
So I actually went to the theater to see Army of the Dead.
Ugh.
I'm sorry.
Ugh.
And what I can say is it gave me a new appreciation for the after effects of Moderna vaccine.
You know, it's funny though, because
That
do you remember back when Eddie Murphy came out with Dreamgirls, and then he lost the Oscar because Norbit came out right before the Oscar? I feel like that's what's happened with Zack Snyder. I mean, I really, really liked the Justice League, and then this is the Norbit. So.
Yeah, that's not a bad that's not a bad comparison. Here's the funny thing. Why does there seem to be such a big media bias against Zack Snyder? What has he done to deserve? Like the other day, there was Variety posted an article bashing Man of Steel. Why are you posting an article about Man of Steel 10 years after that movie came out?
That's
because everybody's happy. Everybody's like hyped up about Army of the Dead, but here you are bashing a movie he did 10 years ago. What's the point?
Warner Brothers is sending stories out to those publications because they don't want to be in business with Zack Snyder and they want to turn people away from his work. They put out like snuff stories in Hollywood Reporter and stuff to kind of make people shy away. So they're so mad he got his cut of Justice League released.
and it's not just like it's not just like Variety and stuff like that. It's just random people on Twitter that I see just like bashing him and saying horrible things about him. And it's like I don't particularly get it. Why is there a bias against Zack Snyder?
Well, first of all, our culture, once they get a hold of the bone, they're the dog that won't let go. That's all of our society. No one changes their mind ever. No one can admit, hey, you know, my opinion has evolved. It's just whatever I am right now, I have to double down on for all time. And there was a period where when Batman versus Superman came out, Zack Snyder made a bad movie that disappointed a lot of people. And at that point, it became very popular to just bring the hate train. And we're not in a place in our society where people can put the proper context to a moment and say, yeah, that film sucked, but maybe the next one will be better. You know, there's a point where I give up on directors, certainly. But then I stop watching the movies, right? So I can't tell you a thing about Avatar because I gave up on James Cameron by then. I can't bash Avatar. I have no right to do it because I'm not going to do that. Like, I feel like the Zack Snyder haters are the same as the Michael Bay haters. Let's face it, Michael Bay makes bad films. But if you're buying a ticket for a Michael Bay film at this point, whose fault is it?
That's been my argument for a long time. It's like people who don't. I mean, obviously now he's a pariah, but I used to say, if you don't like Woody Allen movies, why are you going to see a Woody Allen movie? You know, by after a while, they have such a style. If you don't like Wes Anderson, don't go see a Wes Anderson movie. They're all the same style. You know, and yeah, I mean, people just turn against filmmakers all the time, and then they come back, and you know, the Renaissance happens.
Yeah. But
only when a special edition Blu-ray comes out with a slipcover.
The 5.5 hour version of this as well.
Snyder's laughing his way to the bank, though. He got his cut of Justice League out. Army of the Dead, I'm sure, is doing pretty well. I'm sure he got paid well for it. So, I mean,
it's not doing well theatrically, but that's not where they're intending to make their money. So,
right. Let's talk about just briefly. Let's talk about this deal Amazon made to buy MGM for $8.3 billion.
They did it.
What does that? I mean, what does that mean? What does that? Is Amazon just going to start streaming MGM's lot or MGM's vault, or what's the end game there?
It's money from all directions. They're going to be able to stream stuff. They put out a statement last night saying they can't wait to get a hold of all this IP and create. They want to do new Rockies. They want to do all these James Bond movies. They're gonna put this stuff now. Lauren, I know they're probably gonna change their mind, but as of right now, they're planning on not only putting on streaming, but also putting out physical media of this stuff and selling it on Amazon. So the money is just circular. So you can only get the discs on Amazon. And then the money goes right back into their productions.
Oh, man.
Huh. That doesn't sound like a monopoly, does it?
Doesn't Amazon also own Twitch?
Yes.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. They're going to own everything, too.
Pretty much everything's going to be owned by Apple, Amazon, and Disney.
And you know who else owns MGM and Warner Brothers Archive have a deal, and Warner Brothers Archive's discs are only available on Amazon now too. So Amazon now has a deal with Warner Brothers Archives to only control their discs as well. So
that will be, if it's not already, as it is for a lot of people, where we buy all of our physical media until it ends very soon.
Yep.
Well, I just paid $30 for shipping an imprint films over in Australia to get the straight story and As Good as It Gets on Blu-ray. They're putting them out.
Nice.
Yeah, but $30 for shipping. Good Lord.
Mm.
All the way from Australia, though.
Yep.
Well, let's dive into some topics here. Dan, what have you got for us this week, man?
All right, so I've got a couple brief reviews because I know we're stacked tonight, but I have a couple horror films I wanted to talk about specifically because I'll be honest, so far this year, overall, I've watched a lot of either very painfully average horror films or some really bad ones, as we talked about at the start of the show. So hopefully I can suggest a couple things that you may not have seen. These are a little more obscure, one in particular. So my first film is called Red, White, and Blue, which is a 2010 film from director Simon Rumley that focuses on three characters, including Erica, a beautiful but emotionally stunted young woman bouncing around the bars of Austin, Texas, going from one empty sexual encounter to the next. Then we have Frankie, a struggling up-and-coming rock star with an ailing mother. And Nate, a discharged Iraq War interrogator with a penchant for inflicting pain. The trio's lives intersect in a gruesome collision of blood, grief, and broken dreams. So this film, it's a horror film in the truest sense of the word. There's nothing supernatural or uncanny about it. So you can't disengage with what's happening on the screen as we're drawn into a painfully real world that most of us would rather believe doesn't exist. There's a lot going on here. This is heavy stuff. And you could call this a tragic love story. You could even call it reality-based body horror. And it's most definitely a revenge film. But what makes it so unique is there's no real heroes or villains in this. The story, nobody's clean or easily defined. They function as monster and villain. And for me, I don't know if a movie has ever made me feel so emotionally broken over such morally deficient people. I mean, you genuinely, your heart breaks in this film. It's some ugly stuff. I would kind of compare it as horror through the lens of a Larry Clark or a Todd Solondz. It hits you in a way that a typical gore film certainly could not. And this does get pretty grisly in the last 20 or so minutes. In fact, I would say for me, this hit me hard, much like a Takashi Miike's Audition or a Park Chan-wook's Old Boy. I've always really loved this, and I highly suggest you refrain from watching it if you're feeling depressed or maybe disillusioned with the world, because it goes from heartwarming to soul-shattering by the end credits. A little bit about the cast. Absolutely stellar. Amanda Fuller, not a lot of people know who she is. I know she's gotten some TV work lately in mainstream sitcoms and what have you. She also worked with Mark Center, who's also in this film, on a great film called Starry Eyes, another heavy one. Mark burst on the scene back in 2006 as Ray Pye in the 2006 Jack Ketchum adaptation of The Lost, his novel. This is one that I think perfectly illustrates what our genre is capable of. The acting's on par with any Academy Award nominated film. I would even argue that it exceeds it in some cases. Noah Taylor is probably the best known actor in this, who plays what some would call, I guess we'll just call him the psychopath. Again, he's not a hero or a villain. It just depends how you decide to look at this, because someone you're meant to feel sorry for does something quite horrific in this, and I don't want to give that away, but you can kind of understand where everybody's coming from in this film. And Noah Taylor, a lot of people, if you watch Preacher, he played Hitler on Preacher, a much more bizarre, lighter version of a real life monster. And I still think this is some of his best work. If you want something heavy, please give Red, White, and Blue a shot. Again, IFC Midnight put this out about a decade ago. It has its fans, but I don't know. I don't hear about it. Much like a May Lucky McKee film. I mean, it has its fans, but nobody champions it, and I'd like to see that happen for Red, White, and Blue. Lauren, I know you've seen it. I think you mentioned. I don't know if you're a fan of it, but it's. I don't know. It just frustrates me, and I hope anybody listening tonight, like I said, it will not make you feel good. This is no Army of the Dead. There's no CGI tigers or anything like that. But if you want to push your limits, check that out. My second title that I wanted to highlight for you guys today is much more obscure. In fact, I don't know if I've ever talked to anybody who's watched this movie. It's a zombie film from 2011 called Harold's Going Stiff. Not the best title, to be quite honest, because it might make you think this is, well, maybe a couple different things that it's not. Certainly a sort of goofy zombie comedy, which it's not exactly. So this film follows an aging widower, Harold Gimble, who is leading a life of isolation and declining health due to a horrific new condition called onset Rigger's disease, which is slowly turning him into a zombie. Having given up and resigned himself to his fate, an in-home care nurse named Penny enters his world and begins to give him a reason to live again, if only he can keep his hunger at bay and avoid the local zombie hunting vigilantes. So this is shot in like kind of a pseudo mockumentary style. Very low budget film. This was shot in 9 days. And I have to say, this little film is probably the most emotionally touching zombie film ever. I can't think of too many zombie films that ever, started to, make you cry almost. It's obviously using the zombie myth as a commentary on the ravages of aging and loss of dignity, and as well as the emotional effect on loved ones. This film, for the budget, breathtaking Yorkshire scenery. This is a UK film, if I didn't say that already, and shows what a great story can do, even with severe budget constraints. I really want to throw out a couple names here. Stan Rowe, who plays Harold, perfect. And this guy only has one other credit. Hasn't worked since, which is a crime. I do not understand it. He was perfect in this. The director hasn't done anything since 2011, and this didn't even hit DVD. It's kind of a small label, just quietly came out a few years after they shot it here. I hope some people, again, there's a little bit of sweet-natured comedy in this. You look at the cover, I mean, you're just thinking this is some Shaun of the Dead ripoff. It really is not. I hope people will give this a shot. It really quietly snuck up on me towards the end, and wow, again, what acting quality we can have in our genre. Different film, obviously, but I would compare it to Toni Collette in Hereditary. Why she didn't get a nomination is freaking ridiculous as far as I'm concerned. That's the horror genre can deliver just as well as anything else. And these are two films that are perfect examples. So go out there and check it out. They're both available on DVD. I know Red, White, and Blue does have an overseas Blu-ray, which may or may not be out of print at this point. But, you know, hey, you want something heavy that's not Army of the Dead or The Unholy, check it out. They're amazing.
I actually looked up Harold's Going Stiff. It's available to watch on IMDb TV. You can watch it for free, but it has ads. So
okay. Well, yeah, check it out. It's like 77 minutes, and zombies aren't dead. I mean, this was original, not a new film, obviously, but if you're zombied out, give it a shot.
Cool. Yeah, and Red, White, and Blue sounds pretty
oh yes,
pretty interesting. So is that one what if that one's available anywhere? Let's look it up here. Lauren, what were your thoughts on Red, White, and Blue?
I didn't get as depressed as Dan apparently did with it, but it's definitely not what you think it is going in. And there was a glut of zombie films at that time that were all trying to kind of do something different enough that there was a marketing advantage with zombies. So you had Fido and you had other things. This was a movie that always struck me as unfortunate. There was really no commercial route for it to find a home and an audience, because we don't have what this type of film used to do so well with in the 60s, 70s, and early 80s, which is it would play out regionally, circulating the same 150 prints, right? And if it didn't work in one territory, they changed the marketing in another territory until they found what kind of worked. And they'd even change it just entirely. They'd cut new trailers for the Deep South as opposed to Northern California because it was a different audience. We don't get that. We get like movies, if they get a theatrical, get one shot at it. They get one weekend, one ad push, and that's it. And if it misses, that's it. There is no next day for that film until, it comes out in a Blu-ray with a slipcover 35 years later. And then everyone loves it and was there on the first day it came out. But it's a film like this that probably would have done a lot better with even a video store rollout that mattered, because this thing got dumped onto video. And it just looked like everything else that was coming out. Oh, it's a zombie film with a gimmick. Okay, next. Most people never got past box art,
Mm-hmm.
No, they did not. And the actress that played Penny as well, I mean, she was amazing. She is still working, so at least somebody from this film is out there. Yeah, what a film. I hope people will check it out.
It's a good point, Lauren, because I mean, if you think about it, video stores, why do we rent so many horror films or genre films? Because the cover art was amazing, and but now we have everything at our disposal. We have all these pictures saying click me, watch this, and yet sometimes we click on them, but a lot of times we don't. I don't know what it is. It's like we were, maybe because we spent money on renting them, that we were inclined to watch them, but because it's all free for us right now, because we just pay that monthly subscription fee, we just come and go and don't really care. We'll get back to it. And then it's off the service and we don't really care because we didn't bother watching it at all. And things just get dumped like every Tuesday, every Friday. You can't even keep up.
Right.
Mike, you're going to want to unmute in a second. So I come from the world of music retail, And I can tell you that when record stores existed, there was a culture that existed as a halo around every single store. If we simply played something in store that was not on the radio, I could order multiple copies of it every week and have a small life for that title just in that area where the store was put. I was an independent music buyer, so I bought from the independent labels. So if I decided like, hey, Caroline Records is releasing something that's really kind of cool and I think the Sonic Youth audience will dig it, I could make that happen on a small scale. Video stores had that potential. But today, we only get what we search for or what has been paid to come up when people just turn on the service. I watch a lot of Indian cinema, a lot of Indonesian cinema, right? I'm wearing a May the Devil Take You To t-shirt, right? All that stuff's available, but you got to know it to search for it.
Yes.
That is dead's end. That is absolute dead's end for all these movies. We got to change it. We have to somehow get the culture back.
Well, in the chat, shout it from the rooftops if you like these films.
Yeah, more obscure but interesting films from Dan. Nice, very nice.
You're gonna break Pizzal's bank, man. I keep telling him all these movies to keep.
Well, no, I can watch Harold Go Stiff for free. And let's see, where was Red, White, and Blue? I can get the import Blu-ray from Amazon for $15. So.
Oh, great. Okay. Yeah.
But good stuff, Dan, as always. Thank you, sir.
Didn't have any eels this week. I spared you that.
No wheels this week. Thank God. I couldn't handle two movies with two 2 weeks in a row with like womb eels. I just couldn't have handled that at all. So. What do you got for us, Cam?
Well, I guess we'll start with the new trailer by filmmaker Edgar Wright, Last Night in Soho. If you guys have not checked it out, you should check it out. This is the latest attempt, and I was actually thinking of Laura when I watched the trailer, because there seems to be this movement where modern day filmmakers are trying to make a new version of Suspiria for our generation. We got it with obviously the remake of Suspiria, but we also got it with Darren Aronofsky's Black Swan. I remember when Mark Kermode reviewed that movie, he goes, if I hadn't seen an Argento film, I probably would like it, and the same thing with Last Night in Soho. Like, I don't think it looks bad. I think it looks great, but it definitely looks like they're trying to do the Giallo Dario Argento for people who've never seen one of those films. It's like if Argento had a multi-million-dollar budget, what he could have done even better. And so it got me thinking about Edgar Wright in general, because his last two films are widely liked, and yet they've been kind of buried because of, obviously Scott Pilgrim bombed terribly at the box office, but now it's like got this resurgence with the 4Ks coming out. And then Baby Driver, which some people really liked, but unfortunately it stars Ansel and Kevin Spacey, so that movie's forever buried. But then it also made me think about just his earlier work, and how I remember like a year and a half before Shaun of the Dead came out, George Romero was at Fangoria, and someone said, hey, have you heard about this weird British film that's Shaun of the Dead? He goes, oh yeah, these guys were trying to give me a copy of it over in England, and I finally watched it. It's kind of clever. It's, and that's how I first heard about it. And then by the time I got here to the States, it opened the same night as Team America. And so my friends and I, we went to see Team America, and then we thought we'd jump over and see Shaun of the Dead. And we liked Shaun of the Dead far more than Team America that night. Shaun of the Dead, I think, is a brilliant film because it's hilarious, and yet it is a zombie film completely. And then their cop movie they made, Hot Fuzz, is a cop movie, but it's bloodier than a lot of horror films. And then The World's End is like, here's another genre film, but we're going to tackle alcoholism and aliens. And then Lauren was talking about regional trailers. Well, Edgar Wright made that trailer Don't for Grindhouse. And it's not just it's not just a Hammer horror movie trailer. It's a Hammer horror movie trailer with no dialogue because it was there to trick American audiences to think it was an American movie. So it was like a British import, but it was an American trailer of a British import. He's a very clever guy. He's a really great director. I don't think he's made a bad film yet. So I'm really excited about this Last Night in Soho, but it is very clear that he is going for that Giallo D'Argento mood.
I've avoided the trailer. I heard there's a big spoiler at the end of the trailer.
The last 10 seconds, but you'll know because every trailer is built the same now anyway, right? So as soon as it gets to a certain fever pitch, just turn it off. But it's very well made. Even Shaun of the Dead, it's like, wow, it's, I don't know how you guys, Shaun of the Dead seems like a movie that polarizes horror audiences, which I'm always curious about because it knows exactly what kind of movie it is. And it's also, as funny as it is, it's also very heartfelt. Like you love these characters.
Every zombie comedy since then is compared to it. Absolutely. People seem to love that one to me.
Yeah. But I've listened to podcasts where they just destroy it, and I'm like, I don't see it because it's like, there's just really clever lines. Like even when Simon Pegg's mother calls and Nick Frost gets on the phone and says, "Stay right there. We're coming to get you, Barbara." I love it. I don't know. What did you guys think? Did you guys see this trailer at all?
I watched it. I'm very excited. I do think he's pretty dependable as of now. I liked Baby Driver more than I expected. I thought it was going to be a generic action film. And that was impressive. So far, I don't think he has a stain on his record. I've been a fan since Spaced.
Oh, yeah. That's the other thing I wanted to show. If you guys have not seen Edgar Wright's TV show Spaced, there's this beautiful special edition in which he does commentaries with Kevin Smith and Quentin Tarantino like throughout the series, and it's really, really well done. It's really funny.
It is.
But like Hot Fuzz, I remember going to see that movie going, oh, it's going to be this Michael Bay comedy type of thing. It's so bloody. It's bloodier than Shaun of the Dead.
It is. Yeah. Yeah, he's working on a Running Man film right now, isn't he? I believe.
Yeah, I just jumped on his IMDb and I was kind of looking through the Last Night in Soho page. But before, it's announced he's doing the Running Man.
Do you guys like his work so far? When you saw Shaun of the Dead, did you like that film?
Yeah, I did. Yeah. I liked Shaun of the Dead. I liked Baby Driver. Let's see, what else have I saw Hot Fuzz, but I don't remember very much about it.
Go back and look at it again. Like that and The World's End actually get better on repeat viewings.
I've not seen The World's End. I've not seen Scott Pilgrim. I saw Don't, but
that's one of the Grindhouse movies I wish they made instead of Machete.
But yeah, what I've seen I liked. I just don't remember much about Hot Fuzz.
I was stationed in the United Kingdom with the Navy when Shaun of the Dead came out, and I got to see that within weeks apart of Zack Snyder's Dawn of the Dead. So that was a terrific special double feature to see within weeks of each other. And of course, with Shaun of the Dead, I got all the British humor, pretty much right away. But I did like Scott Pilgrim a lot. As a matter of fact, when we did Zombie Ready for the Obscurity Report, that was the first movie I thought of, even more than Shaun of the Dead. I thought of Scott Pilgrim versus the World. And I really love World's End. But the coolest thing about Edgar Wright, I got to give him a shout out. He actually liked my Twitter review for Star Trek: The Motion Picture. So nice. I got to give Edgar Wright a shout out for that. That's what he'll always be remembered for. There
are podcasts online during the lockdowns where him and Tarantino just riff for 5 hours talking about all types of like British films and British war films for like 3 hours. And I've never had so many tabs open on Amazon looking for these movies. They will get you to buy anything.
Cool. So if you buy the space set, then you have to be ready to buy a bunch of other stuff.
Well, they just
Well,
have a way.
listen to all this.
They all just have a way of talking about movies that just they make you want to buy the Blu-ray just to see this one shot they're talking about, you know. And I miss that because that's the way it used to be with like friends of mine when we'd be sitting around video stores going, "You got to see this movie, man, just for this one tracking shot. Go check it out." You know, throw it up on the TV in the store. Let's do it. I know, Lauren. What do you think of Edgar Wright? All right.
So, I have a weird history with Shaun of the Dead. I love the film, but it actually got released in Europe like 8 months before America.
Mm-hmm.
And so I actually got a import DVD of it and had actually shown it to most of my friends by the time it got its theatrical release here. So it was kind of for about a year of my life, it was a big deal for me to show that movie to people. And what I can say is we have weird backwards vision, right? Objects in the rearview mirror are definitely larger, smaller or larger than they appear. I remember a lot of people not knowing what to make of it on their first viewing. Like, I fell in love immediately, but a lot of people looked at it and said, is it always supposed to be funny, or is only parts of it supposed to be fun? Like, maybe it has more to do with people's expectations of modern comedies, whereas they don't expect any kind of depth or variety to what's going on screen. It's all just bridesmaids, right? Because the thing about Shaun is that it is a legitimate zombie film, and it's also a really interesting family film. It's this film about not being confident that your mother is going to like your girlfriend, right? So it's not a relationship drama, really. It's that family component that's at the core of the film, and at the end of the film, you see what he chooses as a family, because from not embracing the family he had properly, he ends up having to build a family, and that's what he does at the end, completely with a dog in the doghouse, right? So I think the movie has a lot of depth to it, but I think that was at first a problem for the film. Like all good films that have a little more depth than we expect, over time it gets appreciated. But I think that this is exactly the sort of film, again, that America is so bad about releasing. Shaun did very poorly in its American rollout. It got a wide release, but it got what they call a thin wide release, which means it had a single screen in most multiplexes and less than 5 viewings a day. All centered around that classic, 6 to midnight area. They didn't trust it. This film was just not trusted for that opening weekend, and it didn't have a second week in most theaters. It dropped its screen count unbelievably fast after that weekend, even though it had done really well in Britain and it had done well in certain parts of the European Union. But so I think, again, if we're going to have a recurring theme for tonight, it's that America needs to learn how to trust its heart and find a different pathway to viewers' eyes.
Shaun of the Dead is designed for video stores. If that film had come out in '94, you would never find a copy in Blockbuster. It'd be out every night. It's just, I think, if you look, his budgets might have gotten a little bigger, but he still is so clever in how he films stuff. And he's never gotten too big for his britches. When he thought about doing Ant-Man, he spent a year on doing Ant-Man, and then he realized how much it was going to have to tie into the Marvel universe and how he wanted to make an individual film, and he walked away. No harm, no foul. Just said, I can't do this. Cool. Like, I admire people like that. He didn't just chase the big bucks. He went and did The World's End, which, one thing I love is that you can't do a horror comedy if you don't take the threat seriously. And Shaun of the Dead, Hot Fuzz, World's End, the threat is always serious. To do like Hot Fuzz, to do like a Michael Bay cop movie, but put it in the town of, let's say, Wicker Man, it's really crazy, I didn't know what to think of Hot Fuzz the first time I saw it. And then on repeat viewings, I was like, oh, this movie's brilliant. I just couldn't see it. Sometimes especially sometimes the accents are a little thick for me, and so I need those subtitles to catch all the little in jokes that they come throwing at you. But But yeah, he has not made a bad movie. It's just the problem is that Scott Pilgrim, you know, again, it came out way too early. I think that movie is probably 10 years, too early. And yet everybody in that movie, that cast is all major stars now. And then Baby Driver came out. People really liked it. But the whole cast almost is problematic. So that movie just gets buried now. But I mean, you can get the 4K for like $8 now on Amazon.
Who else in that cast was problematic other than
Ansel Elgort and Kevin Spacey? They're the two leads.
What happened with Ansel? I never
what
remember.
happened with him?
I don't know, something about women online and stuff. I don't know. I mean that they're even talking about how, because he's the lead of Spielberg's West Side Story remake, and Twitter has already said that is in their minds dead on arrival. So.
Well, Christopher Plummer just passed, so we can't replace Ansel in that.
No.
But
no.
We can CGI him.
I would have loved Christopher Plummer in Baby Driver.
Just ignore that he's 90 years old.
I would have loved him in The Fault in Our Stars.
But that trailer that Edgar Wright did for Don't, for In the Middle of Grindhouse, it's like, my God, why didn't they make that movie? Like, like how in 45 seconds he captured, the exact feel of those old Hammer horror films.
Yeah. Don't.
And then the movie was called Don't.
Yeah.
From what I've seen of his stuff, I've enjoyed. I really did like Shaun of the Dead, but I grew up on English humor, watching Monty Python and Fawlty Towers, and what was that TV show that had the guy from The Young Ones, Rick Mayhall? I think it was called Bottoms. It was a TV show from England.
I know what you mean.
It's just hilarious. I love British humor. So when I watch those films, it's like I get it. And I'm automatically on board. Hot Fuzz, the whole 9 yards. I love the British style of humor. It's dry, it's very sarcastic, and and it's not for everybody. So I do find that a lot of people that like those movies are usually ones that would also watch Monty Python or some of these other British type humor shows. And the people that don't like these movies are generally not on board with that style of humor. Like my dad loved humor, but he was not a British humor person. So he could watch Monty Python with me, but he wouldn't get the enjoyment out of it that I would. He liked Benny Hill. Benny Hill's like Keystone Cops, yakety sax and running around and being goopy and looking at chicks with nice racks. You can appreciate that kind of
films.
Don't forget that one of the major subplots of Fish Called Wanda is the murdering of several dogs. So
yes,
that is true.
Yes.
So I mean, violence and British humor go together very well.
Oh yeah, and Shaun of the Dead, I think too. I mean, yes, it's uniquely British, but it's also about slackers that like to sit around and watch movies and play video games. So it's still universal, even though
and that's where kind of like for me, Zombie Ready kind of reminded me a little bit of Shaun of the Dead, because you had these central characters that were more concerned with making their video game and the video game world than they were to pay attention to what was going on around them. They were kind of oblivious to this whole zombie outbreak because they were so focused in on what was important to them. And like in Shaun of the Dead, all they wanted to do was go to the pub and have a couple.
Yeah, until this thing blows over.
Yeah, go to the Winchester, have a couple, and this thing blows over. That part was Zombie Ready kind of, to me, lined up. But
if anybody's interested, $22 on Amazon right now, you can get all 3 on 4K. So this is a worthy purchase.
I have it too. I was so happy with that.
Nice. Very cool.
And Piz, if you have not seen The World's End, you got to check it out.
Yeah, I've not seen it.
I second that vote.
Yeah.
I have seen the one, what's the apocalyptic movie with James Franco and all of them in it?
This is the end.
It's the end.
Yeah.
No, The World's End is not about the world ending. It's a bar they're trying to get to.
Oh, okay.
It's like the 12th pub they have to get to in their college town because they never finished
Meanwhile, there's
Meanwhile,
there's an alien invasion happening, a la Invasion of the Body Snatchers.
Oh, cool.
Yeah.
That does sound fun.
And it's probably like, as much as I like Simon Pegg and all the movies, it probably is his strongest role of the trilogy. Like, he has a great lead part.
Yep.
Oh,
Yep.
cool.
I agree.
Well, Stone, what do you got for us tonight, man?
Well, tonight I have a Blu-ray review for all of you. However, before we start, I have a special treat for Cam. I just got the March imprint Via Vision bundle, which includes the two. What is this? The Two Worlds of Jenny Logan, Regarding Henry, written by J.J. Abrams, by the way. The Mothman Prophecies, with a shit ton of bonus material. The 1932 version of Scarface, again with significant bonus material. A Richard Dreyfuss comedy called Let It Ride, with a commentary. And finally, from what I understand is the worst of the bundle, I'll probably watch it and then sell it and then never see it again, Richard Donner's Timeline, starring Paul Walker.
But there's a case of where the book is far superior to the piece of crap movie.
That's what I
mean, I can't expect a movie to live up to the book, but they didn't even friggin' try with that one.
Well, thanks for the warning. All right, well, tonight
those bundles are really cool. Those bundles are really cool because you can sell off the ones you don't like for a pretty penny. So
exactly, yeah, I'll just end up selling Timeline. It won't be a big deal. But tonight I am pleased to discuss one of my favorite slasher movies. My top 3 slasher movies of all time. I'm pretty certain about this because even though I've never seen every single one from the golden period of 1980 to 84, I've seen a good amount of them. And I can safely say that, He Knows You're Alone, I will never see that again, despite having the first performance for Dana Barron and James Rebhorn. Everybody else was pretty much forgotten from that one. And there's a bunch of other slasher movies which I've already seen, like Graduation Day. They weren't bad. I'll never see them again. There's only 3 slasher films I love and adore. Friday the 13th, the original Friday the 13th, The Slumber Party Massacre, and then finally, Eyes of a Stranger, which has been released by Scream Factory in a brand new Blu-ray edition. It doesn't say collector's edition on the Blu-ray, as you can see. However, it is filled with bonus material. Now, what is Eyes of a Stranger about? Well, it's set in Miami, and it's about a serial killer that is basically cruising the streets of Miami at night, strangling female victims. And he likes to call them on the phone and test them and tease them and do all this stuff to them and say nasty, vile things. And of course, this is way back before cell phones were a thing. So we had to deal with the constant ringing, and then you got to hear the horrible messages that he would spew on the other side. And he would be in a phone booth, masking his voice to a certain extent. And but what's interesting is that the central protagonist of this movie, Eyes of a Stranger, is Lauren Tweez from Love Boat, who plays a anchor woman for this local Miami TV station. And her mission is basically to protect her sister, played by Jennifer Jason Leigh, in her very, very first movie performance. She is deaf, blind, and mute as the result, unfortunately, of an attack by a stranger when she was very, very young. And she's sort of going through the process of rehabilitation, despite the fact that she's, extremely secluded and isolated. She doesn't talk to many people. This is a slasher film that has no other teenagers. Most slasher films, always have a group of teenagers that show up to party. No, this is not the case. No. She, they take care of each other. They love each other. But, the older sister is upset that the younger sister isn't, getting out of her slumber, unfortunately, due to this attack. But Lauren Tweez actually believes that the killer that's roaming Miami is staying at the apartment that she's staying at, and goes to investigate herself. And I got to say, the first time I saw this, I definitely felt a lot of Rear Window vibes. And that's been said many times since then. I mean, Piss's review emphasized that just last week. A lot of Rear Window in this. And when the writer was actually, he's billed as Mark Jackson, but he's actually the writer of Friday the 13th Part 2, who just passed away last year, Ron Kurz. And it's directed by Ken Wiederhorn, who directed the 1977 cult film Shockwaves. He also did a 79 film called King Frat, which was essentially a ripoff of Animal House, as well as, he basically became a director for hire for sequels after that, like Meatballs Part 2, and of course Return of the Living Dead Part 2, which, by the way, has been released as a collector's edition through Scream Factory. But Eyes of a Stranger, I think, is a very, very clever and interesting hybrid between Hitchcockian thriller. At this time there were, De Palma was basically the only one in town that seemed to be imitating the master. However, Eyes of a Stranger has a lot of Hitchcock in it. I mean, there's music notes in here by the composer Richard Einhorn, which makes me think of other Hitchcock films, not just Rear Window. I thought of Vertigo. I thought of Psycho, North by Northwest. I mean, there's little tidbits here and there which screamed at me, wow, somebody was in love with Hitchcock when they made this. And you got to remember, and this was pointed out on the audio interview with the composer, for many years, the Hitchcock films, since their releases in the 50s, they weren't available because Hitch had kept them locked under lock and key up until his death in 1980, and they weren't widely seen again until 84. So Ken Wiederhorn he probably saw the movie only once, when he was, a kid and going through film school and everything. But with Eyes of a Stranger, what drew me to this movie, I got to give credit where credit is due. It's really Siskel and Ebert. A couple years ago, there was a review posted from their early days working on sneak previews in Chicago, where they don't give thumbs up to Eyes of a Stranger, but they're oddly very positive towards the movie. They say it is technically sound. They say it is, far better than most of the other slasher films that they had seen. They found it, more disturbing, I think, than the average one, simply because it had these mature elements to it. And it moves at a clip. I mean, it's only 85 minutes. Everything that's in the movie is essential. There's nothing excessive or anything about that or anything. And even the gore is subdued to an extent. I mean, there's a great scene in the beginning where, the killer is stalking his first victim. He chops the boyfriend's head off and decides to put it in the fish tank. So you see this face in the fish tank just like this, staring at the girlfriend when she comes in, and then unfortunately she's going to be attacked. But I mean, they also use that gimmick in He Knows You're Alone, but to be perfectly honest, I much prefer Eyes of a Stranger, particularly when the gore effects are done by the great Tom Savini. And there isn't a lot of it. It doesn't go overboard with the gore, I think. I mean, yeah, you see a knife go through a neck, splashes a little bit of Savini sauce, and then it's over within a couple seconds. But there's nothing, the movie never, ever gets too graphic. Even when this killer is brutal and cold, this murderer is brutal and cold and just, he's a horrible human being. And we never get inside his head. We never really get a sense of what drew this guy to do what he was doing, other than the fact he had a highly negative view of women. There's a scene where Lauren Tweez is in his apartment snooping around, wondering if this is the guy, and he comes home early. He has a bag of groceries. He goes up to the apartment, and we see the tiniest sense of, he, as soon as the elevator doors close, he looks, he throws a negative look at a couple of young women talking in the elevator. That's about all you get into the insight into this guy, and we don't need to know any more than that. Instead, we concentrate on the psychology of Jennifer Jason Leigh and what she's going through. Now, I will say before I get to the bonus features, I think a very unusual and unique theory about the twist in this movie. I'm not going to reveal it. As a matter of fact, hopefully in a few days, the movie Mike and I have been talking about hooking up together for a commentary, which we can make as a Patreon exclusive, because I would love to talk more about this. But I do have a unique theory about the twist in this movie at the end. I'm not going to give away right now, but listen out for that commentary, and that will be on there. As for the bonus, what's up?
I was going to say, there's only 3 words you have to say to sell me on this movie, and that's Jennifer Jason Leigh.
Yes.
I mean, if NECA had made a Jennifer Jason Leigh figure for this release and charged $800, I would have had to be pulling out money from the savings account.
and may I say that, of course, Quentin Tarantino is actually a huge fan of Eyes of a Stranger, so much so he later cast Jennifer Jason Leigh years later in The Hateful Eight, where she got her very first Oscar nomination. So, yeah, Quentin Tarantino is a huge fan of this movie. Now, as for the bonus features on it, you'll see that there is a commentary with Amanda Reyes, and also, genre film critic Justin Kurzel and film historian and Amanda Reyes, audio interviews with composer Richard Einhorn, actor Peter Dupre, Turning the Tables, an interview with director Ken Wiederhorn, Sunshine State Stalker, an interview with actor John DeSanti, Master Slashers, interviews with special makeup effects creator Tom Savini, and special makeup artist Dean Gates. And I managed to get through all these extras. They are all terrific. Now, I would have loved an interview with Lauren Tweez, because I figured Jennifer Jason Leigh was just that would have been a bit too difficult to nab her for something. But I was hoping Lauren Tweez would stop by and say something. But if you understand what she was going through at that time, I think you can understand why she declined not to talk on this release, because I love her in this movie just as much as I love Jennifer Jason Leigh. The interview with John DeSanti, the Sunshine State Stalker, was very, very interesting. I mean, he provided a lot of details about the production and everything. The commentary, oh my God, they did so much research on this thing. I mean, they basically said that halfway through production, that one company was trying to finish this, and then that's when Georgetown Productions came in, who of course did Friday the 13th and Friday the 13th Part 2. And Eyes of a Stranger was distributed by Warner Brothers, of all people. Of course, they handled the international distribution for Friday the 13th. So this was their dip into the slasher pond, you could say. And unfortunately, it didn't do well. The reviews were very, very negative. I mean, Siskel and Ebert was, of course, probably the most ironic of the bunch, at the very, very least, because you look at that review, it's on YouTube. They are both quite positive, and it's very, very shocking. But I loved all of the extras on here, especially the commentary and the interviews. The Tom Savini interview was terrific as well. I mean, it may not be the most ideal release, but for any fan of this obscure gem, and yes, I do think there's a gem among this type of genre movie, I think it's terrific. And I will say in closing that if you own the previous DVD of the Twisted Terror collection of Eyes of a Stranger, which was extras free, there was nothing on here at all. I did notice a small difference with this new Blu-ray, which visual and audio quality, I'm with Piz on what he said, 4 out of 5. But the interesting thing is that this print, this Warner Brothers actually gave him a original theatrical print, because this one had the Warner Brothers worm logo from the late 70s and early 80s before the Shield came back, which this one doesn't have. So Warner Brothers, give them credit where credit is due. They provided a original theatrical print for Eyes of a Stranger. So yeah, that is one of my favorite slasher movies. I'm so glad to have a Blu-ray of this now. It's, like I said, it's a great combination of Hitchcockian thriller and bloody slasher. And, it's funny, on the commentary, they do compare it a lot with Maniac, with Joe Spinell, that came out a few months before. And look, Joe Spinell, that was a great performance, but I can't watch that movie because of the fact we spend so much time getting to the psychological roots of that guy. I think it just becomes almost unwatchable. This one, we learn all we need to about the killer. Those phone calls are creepy as hell. They do deliver in the best possible way. And I love the music in it. I love the performances. I think Eyes of a Stranger is a great overlooked thriller, slasher, or otherwise. Thank you.
And Stone, fun fact: David Lynch reunited Lauren is it Tweez? How do you say it?
Tweez. It's
Lauren Tweez
yeah.
and Jennifer Jason Leigh in Twin Peaks: The Return. They're both in it.
Nice.
Seriously?
Yeah, they're not in the same scene, but they are in it together. So.
Well, now you make me want to watch Twin Peaks now.
It's just the same.
Well, I grew up with Siskel and Ebert, and I remember they said something about it being a very well-made piece of trash. And the subject matter like this does not deserve that kind of talent, and that these filmmakers would serve themselves by making films with better subject matter, because they absolutely hated anything had to do with the slasher genre. And I think that's part of the problem with this film is when it came out, people had seen so many films like this that they just automatically threw it in the garbage bin with the rest of them, and they didn't bother to actually pay attention to what was there, because it is one of my favorite of the genre, and to come out late in the cycle like that's very rare for something this good to come out, because by then it's the rehashes and the wannabes and the crap. But this was actually one that I think kind of got by him just because they were so blindsided by all the stuff they hated. And I think maybe they were so negative toward that other stuff that they couldn't bring themselves to be positive toward a film that was of the same genre. They almost feel like they would go against their own morality if they gave this film a thumbs up, even though they wanted to, and you could tell because it was a very well-made film. So they said that, but they stopped themselves short of actually praising it and taking that moment to condemn its contents, but while praising the artistic merit of the filmmakers. It's kind of sad when you paint yourself in a corner like that, but yeah, they were notoriously negative toward anything slasher except for Halloween. Right. That was like the one, but that was first in their minds. That was like first, and they loved Halloween, but everything that came after that was just, garbage, and they loved to tear it apart and have special shows about how Hollywood hates women and this, that, and the other thing, and they got up on their soapboxes a little too often on that subject when it came to these films. It's like, come on, guys,
they were also offended by single audience reactions. Like they kept complaining during Eyes of a Stranger that somebody was making fun of Jennifer Jason Leigh clapping for her dog or whatever. It was probably just one asshole teenager. You don't have to judge the whole audience and think that they're people that just want to make fun of these characters and take delight in what's happening to them. I think they assumed the whole audience was like that just based on one person.
Stone, do you remember when Lost Highway was in the movie theater? David Lynch actually slapped on the poster 2 thumbs down Siskel and Ebert on the poster for Lost Highway, and actually got more people to come in. When I see the Hitcher get zero, when Ebert gave the Hitcher 0 stars, that made me watch it.
I never gave.
I remember those guys when I remember those guys when they start out being from the Chicago area, extended Chicago area. I grew up with them when they were just on local PBS, right? Before they became sneak previews and then at the movies, and then, what had become like Siskel and Ebert and the movies and the various variations of their show. But I remember when they first started out in the 70s and it was only on PBS.
Yeah.
And so I was there for the whole run of their, and of course, after Gene passed away, I kind of, what was the point in watching anymore? But then I had moved away from that area, and I kind of gave up on them anyway. But it was like I would watch Siskel and Ebert to figure out what I wanted to see based on what they didn't like.
Exactly.
Usually it was pretty good accuracy. Occasionally they would surprise me by liking something that I actually thought was entertaining. But with Gene, it was always some, he loved his foreign films and his artistic stuff, and those films have merit, and there's good ones. Don't get me wrong, but sometimes maybe I don't want to go see a 3-hour movie about the life of a shoe cobbler. As good as it may be, maybe I'm looking for a quick bang and a little entertainment. just to get my weekend going. You know, I don't know. That's just
I'm just guessing that Quentin Tarantino wants to see the Shoe Cobbler movie.
he probably does.
Mike,
He probably wants to make a sequel. With
I was just gonna say that John Waters tells a story recently that for every 6 months he would get a phone call from Gene Siskel saying, "I know you must know where I can get a hold of a real snuff movie."
Wow. Okay.
He used to work.
Guys, man.
He used to hang out at the Playboy Mansion.
Yep.
Well, to give credit where credit is due, Siskel did give his thumbs up to The Thing.
And Ebert did write Beyond the Valley of the Dolls. So
Yes, he did. Oh, yes, he did. One of my
and
favorite
Siskel's
movies of
prized
all time.
possession was John Travolta's disco suit from Saturday Night Fever.
yep.
Thank you.
But they also published the home address of Betsy Palmer when they didn't like Friday the 13th. So-
They got a little goofy, man. That was
Siskel.
questionable.
That was all Siskel. Yeah.
Yeah, he was
But I
always a
can-
bit of a.
I'll second everything Stone said about Eyes of a Stranger. I've liked that movie for many, many years. I think it's got a great rewatch value.
Oh, yes.
And yeah, it's really well made. It's kind of too bad that Wiederhorn sort of turned into just like the director for hire. Pay me and I'll direct whatever. Because I mean,
Yeah.
Shockwaves is I think Shockwaves is really good, and then Eyes of a Stranger I think is really good.
Well, I think
So-
Hollywood has proven that you can, especially back in those days, you can make a really good genre picture, and just like Siskel and Ebert, they'll just look at you like, "Oh, you can make a really good trashy movie." But why should we give you actually good material to work with?
Yeah,
That's why people leave these movies off of their resume, because oh, you were in that movie. Well, you can't be in my movie because you were in that movie. It's like you got that stank on you. I don't want you around me. That's kind of
Just real
unfortunate.
quick,
So.
Just real quick, has Jennifer Jason Leigh ever talked about this movie at all in any capacity?
Not that I've heard.
not that I'm aware of. No.
Oh.
I discovered it late night on an early cable service. I think it was called On TV, which was like an add-on antenna that we put on the big antenna that was strapped to the side of the house back in those days. And it was kind of like having Shudder, but you had like several different channels within this service. You had the romance, the action, the comedy, and the horror. And I saw it late night one night on that service, and I fell in love with it. I loved the movie.
I saw it late night cable television too. I don't remember. I think TNT or TBS or something like that. Just some late night, And yeah.
Well, Jennifer
Good,
Jason Leigh probably got in the door for Fast Times at Ridgemont High because of this movie.
Pretty much. I believe it.
Yeah.
And that just got a Blu-ray by Criterion. Yeah.
A great Blu-ray, from what I understand. I think Flesh and Blood might have been my first film of hers with Rutger
Paul
Hauer.
Verhoeven.
Yeah,
Paul Verhoeven.
she has a hell of a resume. Not some films that aren't very as well known. Heart and Midnight, I think, was one she did.
Try Last Visit to Brooklyn.
Yeah,
Oh,
yeah,
man. Yeah,
a lot
I
of good
remember.
ones that are overlooked.
But Stone, I do have to correct you. Her first Oscar nomination was for Georgia. Then Hateful Eight.
Oh, my fault. Okay. Yes, you're right. You're right.
Just keeping it real.
Whenever
that.
I see Jennifer Jason Leigh, I always think single white female.
Oh yeah,
That's
Not
the
the-
one that had the big
I
impact on me.
Not
Hate
the
that
two-
movie.
Not the two
Hate
trucks.
that movie up the street and down the street. That's an awful film.
I always just think of her between the two trucks and how traumatizing that was as a kid, seeing that moment. Like, they talk about the hook scene in Texas Chainsaw Massacre. When I was a kid, I swore you saw her ripped apart in the hitcher.
Mm.
It was so ingrained. When C. Thomas Howell screams like that, good lord.
Great review, Stone, as always.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
Mike, what do you got for us, man?
Well, I want to step outside the genre for a moment. As much as I love horror movies, I love all kinds of movies, and especially documentaries. And fan is short for fanatic. I'm a fanatic for film. I'm also a fanatic for music. And I didn't mean to leave you hanging there, Lauren, but discovering new things is always a positive, especially when it comes to music. And the film I'm talking about is a documentary called The Pedal Movie that was produced by Reverb.com, which is, I'm not affiliated with them, but they're a site where you can buy and sell new and used music equipment. But it's pedal porn. Okay, it's about the invention of the effects pedal for guitars and when it started, and there's interviews with all these artists like Steve Vai and the pedal makers and the producers of music, and starts in like 1931 with the first electric guitar pickup that was put into an acoustic guitar to amplify it. And at first, as they say in the film, amplification was just meant to make the guitar louder. It wasn't meant to change the tone. But then in the 1950s, with blues and rock and roll, there became a different kind of edgier sound people were looking for, and they were cranking their tube amps till they would distort because they really liked that tone. And some people were even taking razor blades and slicing their speaker cones to get a rattier tone out of it because they didn't know anything else. Link Wray's Rumble. I think if you're a Quentin Tarantino fan, you've heard Rumble several times, and it's definitely a landmark release. But the first recorded fuzz tone was an accident. It was a brand new console in Nashville. They were recording a Marty Robbins song, of all things. And the bass player plugs straight into the board and records his line, and when they listen to it back, it's distorted. It wasn't supposed to be. But Marty Robbins liked that sound, so he said, leave it. I don't want to pay to have it re-recorded. Just leave it. It sounds good. Other people heard that. They started calling the studio, and they're like, hey, we want that sound. And he was like, well, we can't reproduce it. We actually fixed the board. It was a malfunction that wasn't intentional. And so, but that gave the guy that ran the studio an idea. He happened to be good with tools and understood electronics. So he built a pedal called the fuzz tone, which was like the very first in box. Didn't sell well in America, but they were able to distribute it through Gibson and sold a few copies, but they sent it over to England to music stores. And, the British invasion people started falling over it. The Beatles loved it, the Who, and of course, Satisfaction by the Rolling Stones was the song that really kind of kicked off the fetish with fuzz tone. Keith Richards initially hated it because he was trying to reproduce the sound of a horn section because they couldn't afford a horn section for the song, but he used the fuzz box on that guitar line, and that just like created a craze over there. And like a lot of things, America's slow to catch on to new trends. We have to wait till it like Jimi Hendrix had to go to England to become a star before he could come back here. Kind of like that. And so you got the Who wants bigger amplifiers. Marshall gets in on the game, start building the stacks. They want these distortion boxes. The British invasion happens. Jimi Hendrix, of course, mentioning him, was crazy about effects. And you had these MIT guys that were looking for an angle, always looking for something to build. Back in those days, you could go to the gig and then meet with the guys after the show. Be like, hey, I heard this sound. I can make something that does this sound. And, of course, they were all about it because experimentation and pushing the boundaries of what was possible was exciting. So they would build somebody build an Octavia for Hendrix, and then they would build this box for Jeff Beck and Jimmy Page, and then of course those sounds started becoming more and more wanted on this side of the pond, and then it goes through this the 50s, 60s, 70s where you get all the phase shifters and the flangers and with Jimi Hendrix, and then Eddie Van Halen was the next guy that really took effects to a whole nother level. But in the meantime, you had the prog rockers like Rush and Pink Floyd. So these effects pedals not only created a new sound, but they created actually new genres of music. Like you would not have heavy metal or hard rock without the fuzz tones or the distortion boxes. You wouldn't have Pink Floyd or prog rock without the choruses and the delays and all these different. So there was new genres of music being created by using these pedals. And the movie just goes through from then till now, and how everything's changed and how everything went to, in the late 70s, the Japanese market jumped in on it with Ibanez and Boss, and they perfected the little stomp box and made it affordable for everybody. And Electro Harmonix was making anything that they thought sounded crazy. and and it was just like a big boom of creativity, and kind of like what Lauren was saying about the music store. Somebody heard something they hadn't heard before. They were like, "What's that? I'm interested in that. That's something different." And we had a music store in Indianapolis where a local band guy was a manager, and he always played the music he wanted people to hear. And that would turn us on to stuff that we would never hear of, through the regular means, the radio or whatever. It's before MTV really was a thing. These distortion boxes and these different boxes were kind of the same thing. It was kind of an underground spread amongst musicians that would bubble up into popular music. And, the wah-wah was created just by a guy that wanted to, it was like Clyde McCoy with the jazz guys with their horns. They would have that cup. Like you could hear that sound on like Minnie the Moocher, wah, 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 type thing. Well, they're like, we need to make a pedal that does that for guitar. Just anything was, the world was your oyster at that point. If you were creative and you had a friend that was good with tools, or you had access to any of these type of diodes or whatever, you could just, create anything. So they're like, well, what are we going to put this thing in? And they look over at an organ and it's got a volume pedal. Hey, let's put it in there and see what happens. And then they start handing them out to Jimi Hendrix and all these people, and they're like, "Oh, we love this thing." And of course, not only in rock, but also it went to funk, and it gave birth to the 70s cop show theme and porn and all these other things. Stevie Wonder had one in his band, and Marcus Miller and all these guys. It just started permeating throughout all different forms of music. These different boxes that made different noises, and it was almost like Batman and his utility belt, all those wonderful toys, and, this movie is 2 hours and 23 minutes of pedal porn. Now, granted, it might be a limited audience, but for me, I was enthralled for the entire runtime. Just listening to these, they have Eddie Kramer, who produced Jimi Hendrix, and they have all these different producers and songwriters and musicians. Like I said, they talk about Zappa, who was a big experimenter of sound, and how what he did reflected on Steve Vai, and then Steve Vai did this, and then that did that. And, you wouldn't, like U2, you wouldn't even think about it, but without delay and chorus, you wouldn't have U2. It would just be clean channel. Ding, 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 ding. There wouldn't be nothing special to it. And they talked to the Smashing Pumpkins and how the Big Muff kind of came back in the 90s, because everything, by the time they hit the 80s, everything went digital with racks, and everybody had big like refrigerator racks full of digital gear, which was the sound of the 80s, whether you're listening to Prince or any of that other kind of stuff, the new wave and the pop and the metal stuff. Everybody was using rack units. Well, part of the grunge movement was bringing everything back to kind of the beginning with the amplifiers and pedals, and just the rebirth of all that. And then how the boutique pedals, these guys started out modding the old pedals to make them better. And now you have GHS, and you have Earthquaker devices, you have all these new companies, and it just goes through the decades, and it's just very, very interesting, and I do highly recommend it. Unfortunately, it's only available on Vudu to rent or buy. I think rent SD is $3.99, buy is $11.99. Apple or Google Play. Those are the only places it's currently available. But if it sounds like something that's interesting to you, I love music. I'm a guitar player, so this was right up my alley. So I was like target audience for this crap, because being born in the late 60s, grew up with all that. This is like the soundtrack of my life, and learning who built these things and why and how they were used was just fascinating to me. And it was for 2 hours and 23 minutes, a documentary you would think would get a little dry. Mm-hmm. But, some of the pedal designers aren't the best interviews, but there are some, like Brian Wampler and Josh Scott from JHS, and some of these other guys have a lot of personality, and they can really, really get you excited about the thing if that's your, I love pedal porn. I love music. I watch, they talk about YouTube and how the internet affected pedal building, and how YouTube affected pedal building, and how everything has changed throughout the years, and things are going back to digital, but with digital sound production, DSP. And now you have like companies like Strymon that build a reverb that costs like $400, just a pedal. I have a Line 6 Pod Go. The thing costs $450, and it does, it'll do everything except cook me a sandwich. Now, is it like NASA style quality? No, but for what I'm working on right now, I don't need that exacting tonality. But if you're working if you're paying $10,000 a day or an hour or whatever to work in a studio, you're going to want the best sound possible. So you might be interested in some of those choices. But it's just fascinating how they come up with this stuff. And I'm not an MIT graduate, but I can understand the passion. I think we all can. And there's also we live in a world in our little part of the slice of the world where collecting is a thing. You look behind all of us, and there's rows of collectibles and movies and stuff. Well, there's people out there that collect pedals. They want all the Boss pedals, or they want all the Ibanez pedals, or all the variations and the mods, and so it's kind of you feel some brotherhood there with that mentality. And a lot of us that love movies, especially horror films, also love music, rock and roll. Some of us heavy metal, some punk, some grunge, whatever. The worlds are kind of together in some way or another. And so if you like movies like Terror in the Isles, or what's the last ones that have been coming out, Heart of Darkness, or the different documentaries that have been coming out about horror films and sci-fi films, if you like that kind of stuff, you would probably be into it if you like music and instruments. And I definitely give it a high rating. I really enjoyed it.
Very cool. Yeah. A lot of pedal porn. Nice.
Pedal porn, not bad. It's always good.
Right on.
You had me
Also
at pedal porn. That's all.
Also could apply to bicycles, but doesn't in this case.
Not in this case.
I was watching an interview with Billy Corgan not long ago, and he was talking about the Big Muff and how he was like, when we were doing, I think it was Siamese Dream. It's like, we were all using the Big Muffs and to create that sound. He's like, you could buy these things for $70 anywhere. And he was like, after Siamese Dream came out, they were on tour, and he went to some music store to get a Big Muff for whatever reason, and it was 4 or 5 times what he used to pay for it. And the guy at the music store was like, "Well, it's your fault."
Yeah, that's actually in this movie. That interview that he did about that. He's like, yeah, the Big Muff that's the Siamese Dream tone. I mean, these grunge guys just went back and got the ratty amps, and they got the old, like Kurt Cobain. He used a Boss DS1 and a small clone Electro-Harmonix chorus. That was like his sound plugged into an amp. We're using a guitar that was a throwaway model, the Mustang, which was looked at as an entry-level student guitar in the 60s that was never taken seriously by actual musicians. But they were just like, yeah, I'll take that. Yeah. And, and Jack White of the White Stripes, he was another one in the early 2000s that bought those Silvertone and the Sears catalog guitars and the crappy pedals. And, there was a movie that came out a few years ago called It Might Get Loud with The Edge and Jimmy Page and Jack White. That's another good one to check out, where they explore this type of stuff. It also goes through the studio where before these effects existed, and like the Beatles, even though I'm not a huge Beatles fan, I do recognize their impact on the genre and on the creation and the creative process, where they would like slow down the tape to get a flange sound, and they would like mechanically create these effects before there was a pedal. And then people were like, how'd they do that? Well, how can we reproduce that? And then that would result in the creation of a pedal. So how everything's just kind of all intertwined together. And, rock and roll is relatively young form of music. Started out with blues and jazz, and then you amplify it, make it louder, add some distortion to it, and get a little goofy, and you got rock and roll. And since the 1950s. So, if you look at the age of how long art has been around with music and different things, it's a relatively young genre. And when people say rock is dead, no, it's not dead. It'll just go through another change and morph and add new elements. And, it's just like we went through the hair metal craze of the 80s, and then grunge basically brought back the end of the 60s and the early 70s. We just had a renaissance. And in the early 2000s, people decided they really liked hair metal all of a sudden. So there was a bit of a renaissance of that. And then, and it's funny how one pedal can create an entire genre. Like the first distortion pedal I ever had was a Boss HM2 heavy metal pedal. That one pedal is directly linked to the creation of Swedish death metal. Stuff like that is fascinating to me. It's just like how one guy can get a hold of a box and create a sound, and other people go, "Hey, what's that?" Next thing you know, you got 5 bands that are using that, and then there's more, and then there's more. And you know that's just great. That's what I love about music, is just how universal it is. And the movie does kind of lose a little steam toward the end when it gets to the modern era, but that's for obvious reasons. But other than that, it's an excellent watch, and I do highly recommend it.
Thurston Moore of Sonic Youth tells a fascinating story about when they were recording Daydream Nation. Thurston Moore was always he always wanted tones that he never had heard before. That was his whole thing. And they were struggling because Daydream Nation is much more of a conventional rock record than anything they'd made up to that point. So he needed something to offset that. So he walked into a music store, a instrument store, walked up to the counter and says, "Excuse me, sir, what do you sell that's broken?" And that's the sound of that record, is broken pedals. Things that were not working properly that had been returned.
Jay Mascis gives a pretty good, Dinosaur Jr. He gives a good interview about the origin of their sound. And a lot of it was just experimentation. And everybody says this is junk. Well, let's see what we can do with it. And it was like they were almost purposefully trying to create noise that nobody would like, just to see if somebody would like it.
Mm.
The noise rock and the art rock and stuff of the 90s. And a lot of that stuff is actually, if you go back and check it out, it's actually very creative and pretty good stuff.
I'm just going to say what we're all thinking. We really need a new Limp Bizkit record. Really.
Did you break one? You need to replace one? That's what you're saying.
They listen, yeah.
Because if I had any, I'd break it.
They break records every day.
Yeah, we need a new Limp Bizkit, like we need another pandemic.
Aren't they the same thing?
That would be that should be the name of their record. Pandemic.
The new pandemic. Yeah,
and somehow misspell it.
As only Fred Durst could do.
I have a picture of Fred on the cover with like a needle. Yeah. Oh, jeez.
Mike.
Doctor costume, white lab coat, red Yankee cap turned backwards, the needle coming at you.
Mike, music related. I had a friend that was a music teacher, and one day his class was just talking, not listening to anything, and he kept giving them, directions. Please, you guys have to calm down, listen. They weren't listening, so he finally just shut off the lights, said, "You guys are not leaving until the bell rings. You have 15 minutes. You're gonna sit in the dark." And then he played a bootleg Yoko Ono track of her just for like 10 minutes straight, and they never acted up again.
That'll do it.
I think
Holy
that could
shit, that's like the nuclear option.
That's how they got the guys out of the compound at Waco. They played that stuff.
Yeah.
For real.
I was just that could be considered like actual torture, I think. So
General Wesley Clark just turned on Yoko Ono and try and clear up that situation.
jeez. That's war crimes right there. But very interesting, Mike. Yeah, definitely very. And we've got some rockers in the chat who are all about it, so that's very cool. Lauren, what do you got for us, man?
Well, before I begin with the topic, I picked up a few things this week. And one of them is going to make Dan very happy. The other one should make everyone very happy. So I found a store that was actually selling, unfortunately for, suggested retail price, but the great Paul Nash's The Beast with the Magic Sword.
Yes.
The third of the series and the prequel, which is the cool thing about it. It's also the most fantasy of the bunch. It's a really bizarre film, and there are topless ninjas in it.
Sweet.
Yeah. And the other thing I picked up is not so much what the movie. I love the movie, but I already owned it. But how this movie is presented in this case is something that makes, I think, all of our hearts skip a beat. So it's not 2002's The Darkness, a film starring Anna Paquin. It's a haunted house film that I've always liked quite a lot. I know it doesn't have a greatest reputation, but my copy I bought this week. is the blockbuster rental.
Brilliant.
It does have the original art slipped in there, but this is going in my collection very proudly.
Nice.
So I want to talk a little bit about the reputation the horror genre has as a genre that has leaned into misogyny as entertainment. So close your eyes and imagine a world where London after midnight was only a YouTube click away, and where like Dwight Fry's murderous rampage was still in Bride of Frankenstein, Inglorious 35 millimeter. Imagine where all the money shots in Friday 13th Part 7 are still intact. Sounds like a better world than we have, you know. It's where I want to live, but we don't live there. So how did we lose all this? Why did we lose it all? In some cases, the filmmakers and the distributors didn't think enough of the films, and they just threw away the footage because they didn't think it would make a difference to any of us ever. You know, they didn't care like we care about the genre. But even more often, though, it was censorship, or really more precisely the fear of censorship, that had reared its ugly head. You know, this was material that was considered obscene or nasty or out of touch with the common person. It had no place in like polite society, and it had to be controlled or eliminated or ignored. So today we hear all the time that the horror genre's past in particular is misogynist, that it has leaned into misogyny for entertainment value. Movies like Maniac, both the 1934 pre-code shocker by Dwayne Esper and the more modern Video Nasty by William Lustig, they were called anti-women. There was protests for both of those films, with claiming that these films were against women and were demeaning what it meant to be a woman. Same thing with Fulci's New York Ripper, infamously, and even Argento's Animal trilogy came across some real abuse in the press as being anti-woman. You know, the knives are clipping off panties, and most of the victims are women. Having these kind of accusations hurled at a film does create a certain interest in the film, but it's interesting because it's really the criticisms that have drawn people to the movies more than the content. So I want to make it clear, though, that I'm not saying that films aren't sexist. Sexism is a very different thing than misogyny. Sexism can be extremely quiet. It can be extremely pervasive. It can be built into systems that were written in a time that's no longer today. I can accept that there is casual sexism in film. I don't think you throw the baby out with the bathwater if it's a great film, but it also has some sexism in it. You have to, as a viewer, make a determination about how much you can handle of that, right? But misogyny is a different monster, and lumping them together is just intellectual laziness. It's suggesting that there's no difference between growing up in a household that didn't value women as much as they should have, and so still carrying some of those traits in your language and actions, which is not a good thing. But it's a lot different than actively hating women and making one of your life's goals to repress women. Horror, when it's successful, always reflects our real world. We see dangers that are too honest on film, and they parallel our everyday lives. And that causes us to recoil. That's what we like to do when we watch these movies. We like being off-put. We like to scream. We like to feel grossed out or uncomfortable or laugh, because gallows humor is a thing. It's a real reaction we have. And all those are appropriate responses to misogyny. We should be off-put by it. We should want to scream or run away from it. Or we should want to laugh at the person who's dumb enough to still have those attitudes. Because it's like an edgy joke, right? It has some truth embedded in it that we can recognize. And so, you know, among all the murder scenes and jump scares and masked killers, there's something more there that we should really respect. And these movies are not endorsing the objectification of women or the downplaying of women's value as much as they're exploring the reality that exists in our society and then amplifying it dramatically so that we're seeing a glorious magnification. And that's why we respond. We respond because we recognize that it's a part of our world. The best example I can give is from a film that I don't think anyone on this panel likes, but I don't care. I'm going to give it anyway. Hostel. At the beginning of Hostel, the three male leads walk through a cat house, and they look from room to room and see the silhouettes of women performing sex acts. And they're, of course, mouth agape, kind of in awe, the typical vision of male gaze that you can imagine. At the end of that film, they're forced through another hallway, and they're forced to see into rooms where these horrific acts of violence are being committed. The scenes are framed exactly the same, and they're meant to contrast each other and to explore the attitudes that these characters portrayed earlier in the film for what they would look like if you were on the other side. Horror is one of the few genres that can do that, because it's one of the few genres that can exaggerate so beautifully to make a point. Or, you see, normally it's not about making a point. It's not about affecting anyone's life. It's about connecting with people. Taking elements of our world that are not perfect and showing them in a light that makes you feel like you're part of that story, and that story has some weight and purpose. I've never been able to connect with a romantic comedy because I've never met cute with anyone in a supermarket. But I can connect with that concept from Hostel because I have found myself being a typical male at times, and my eyes have wandered, right? I can admit that. That's fine. It doesn't make me a horrible person. It's not my proudest moments, but when you see it elevated on screen and magnified, it feels like a real thing. And it's kind of rubbing your nose in some of your worst attitudes. I think that's healthy and legitimate, and I think it's surprisingly literate inside a genre that's consistently being downplayed for its intelligence. To not examine our societies, to become complacent in our failings, and that would be true misogyny, because to only put pleasant, reassuring images on screen, it just does not represent our world or our anxieties. We've all had that horror film we watch, and it tends to be increasingly the haunting movies, right? Because we are more and more skeptical as people towards that sort of thing. We have no connection with that, and overlaying a metaphor onto it is increasingly difficult, which is why most of those metaphors for haunted house films are now financial. But if we don't actually explore the violence and the threat of violence, then we can't get anywhere. And there's no questioning the fact that women have had a really tough time in our society at many points. We're probably living in a better time now than we ever have, and we should be very proud of that. And this is not a woke cry for help for anyone. But what it is saying is that the horror genre deserves its credit, that all along it was the unflinching look at the real problems. No other genre had the balls, inappropriately enough, to go after it. But this one did. That's why films like Miss 45, which really have no right to be called horror films, but they fit in the genre so perfectly, right? Because other genres wouldn't do this. Women have always had a tough fight in our society. Hell, probably every society. But while she watches these films, every lady gets to be the final girl of the story, at least for the running time. And they get to face down the worst of our culture, and they get to survive to tell the tale. Those who would censor or threaten to censor or even use language to demean the genre for attitudes towards women completely misunderstand horror.
That's how I always felt about Siskel and Ebert's reviews of these movies. Like you said, the horror genre is one of the only genres that looks at the darkness of humanity straight in the face and shines a light on it in an unflinching manner. Now, everybody has dark thoughts. Everybody has dark emotions. It's part of us, with yin and yang, the light and the dark. It's within us all. Even the nicest person in the world has a bad day where they think a thought that they wouldn't normally think, or even a thought that makes them shudder themselves, like, holy shit, I didn't think I was capable of thinking that way. Right? But then you go to these movies and that is like on the screen for 90 minutes, and it kind of forces you to deal with not only with the darkness around you in the world and in society and in humanity, but the darkness within yourself. And it's very important that we have that, because a mirror doesn't lie, and we need to have a mirror shoved in our face occasionally just to remind us who we really are, and to try to, like you said, demean these films and erase them and get rid of them because they're somehow morally reprehensible or offensive is kind of missing the entirety of the point. These movies are, like Siskel and Ebert would say, all these slasher films are a reaction to feminism. It's punishing women. Get back in the kitchen. What are you doing? Yeah, no, that's not what it's saying. It's more or less, if you think about it, the journey of feminism and what it's like to break out of that darkness and to announce yourself as an individual and as a person of meaning. That and these bad guys that killed these women, they were bad guys. You're not supposed to enjoy what they're doing. You're supposed to enjoy what happens to them at the end of the film, because the best part of a slasher movie is when the killer gets killed, or how it happens, or they always have the evil. The more evil the character, the more gruesome the death has to be to pay off all the things that they did throughout the film.
Right.
So I think most people are. Yeah, most people are just missing the point entirely, and they're the surface thinkers, and they're the problem with society.
I Spit on Your Grave is a great example of what I'm talking about, in that movie is very frank with its rape scenes, multiple rape scenes. But you know what? Isn't that less offensive than downplaying rape? I mean, isn't it? The fact that it's uncomfortable shouldn't make it objectionable.
No, that film was originally titled Day of the Woman. Right. It was the moment where the worm turned, right? And it was like, I am no longer going to be your victim. I'm going to turn the tables on you and make you the victim because of what you did to me. That was like the moment of, I'm not going to take this shit anymore.
I think Joe Bob Briggs' commentary over that movie changed a lot of people's minds about that film, if you ever get a chance to listen to it. But a couple quick things, Lauren, great piece. I think Hostel would not have gotten that kind of reaction if anybody but Eli Roth had made the film, but because he kind of comes across as a glorified frat boy himself, they thought that that's the way he looks at the world. And the other thing is that I think that these protests, I mean, I could be wrong, because you would know, only has to do with the movies. Like, you can be as graphic as you want in a book and no one's protesting, right? Absolutely. So it's only horror movies that get this kind of crap. But like short stories, literature, unless it's American Psycho or something like that, like nobody's protesting books because they don't read. America doesn't read.
Throughout the centuries, there have been protests. There have been book burnings, Slaughterhouse-Five. I mean, some of that stuff was covered even in a goofy movie like Footloose. Mm-hmm. Right. Like the Devil's Tritone, the different notes that you play in music is evil, and this instrument's evil, and the saxophone will turn you into a drug addict, and even the electric guitar and rock music and stuff. If you're predisposed to that type of behavior, you're going to do it anyway. It doesn't really matter if a saxophone's involved.
To Cam's point, though, like Rath James White or Ed Lee have far worse, more graphic material in their novels than you could ever put on film legally. Ever. And I mean, it's not even close. It's ridiculously a big vista between the two. So yeah, you're right. There's something about film, probably because it's so direct in our society and so immediate. You look at a film for an hour and a half, you come away with the experience of having experienced it. And it was passive. You just sat there. It washed over you.
What about I'm sorry.
No, so I think if we had to work harder for film, we would treat it differently. The same way reading a novel we treat differently. Problem is we're making it easier to consume film, so it's only going to get worse.
Mark Kermode, when he reviewed Lars von Trier's Antichrist, he called it a misogynistic movie, and Willem Dafoe, who was there to promote it, said it's about misogyny. That's not the same thing as being a misogynistic movie.
Right.
Yeah.
I always, I'm sure I've mentioned this before, but whenever I hear the horror being considered misogyny or misogynistic or slashers in particular, I always point out there's a reason why, it's called the final girl. It's always, not in every slasher, but in most slashers, it's a woman who survives because she's smart. She has all of her wherewithal. She's resourceful, and she overcomes the big, scary, masked man who's holding the very large, sharp implement that he wants to penetrate her with. So, what's misogynistic about that?
You could make the argument that the underlying morality is of the good girl, the virginal final girl, is problematic. That's a much longer conversation, and I think it's much more nuanced than it usually gets. But that's the only one I would say that I can at least entertain.
Well, I always, when people mention that, I go, "What? That's because slasher films are very Christian. They're very puritanical.
They're very, yeah, absolutely."
And also, John
because the audience was.
John Carpenter said that he didn't mean for that to be the interpretation of Halloween. He just said, well, Laurie's the one that's not distracted by other things, so she could see what was around her. He didn't mean it. I mean, of course, we know John Carpenter. If it was up to him, he'd have Laurie, being a pot smoker and that type of thing too.
She does smoke pot in that movie.
Oh, she does. She does. You're right.
But here's the thing. I think that, again, there's a societal predecessor to the slasher film, which was the urban legend. So all those stories about babysitters getting phone calls from within the house, and lovers' lane being interrupted by hooked hand killers. Those are the societal predecessor, and that's where the whole virginal thing comes from. I mean, we can talk about it, but that's going to take an entire 3 hours of another episode of Regionfree. But my main thing is I just would like us to get beyond this argument that presenting real problems that women deal with is somehow against women. It's insane. It really is. It's the wrong behavior.
Would I Spit on Your Grave or Miss 45, if they were released today, be called woke?
No.
You don't think so?
You know why not? Because they violate the line that the audience that would embrace them as woke won't go over. They both have early scenes that are really uncomfortable. So woke films tend to be, and I'm using that word to the best of my knowledge, okay? Because I realize that everyone, when they hear the word woke, defines it differently. For me, woke is not wanting to ever present anything but a glowing endorsement of a social group of your choosing. So nuance goes right out the window. That's how we have the Captain Marvel thing, right? Whereas it's like we just provide the best possible version, a flawless human being. It's ridiculous. And I still haven't seen Black Christmas. I can't speak to it. But if all the men in any given work are all completely troglodytes, that is the condition that grows out of the woke mindset, as I see it, because it's prescriptive. It's not descriptive. Slasher films are describing the world around us and then amplifying them. Whereas something like Captain Marvel is telling society how it should be, which is the difference. And I think that approach could actually work. The problem is where Hollywood is right now, there's zero chance of it work because screenwriters can't sell nuance. It's not that there aren't good writers out there. There's some incredible screenwriters out there. But when they turn to a producer and say, hey, how about making this? The producer goes, I can't cut a 30-second television ad for this. Go back to the drawing board. Because that's where Hollywood is at. Independent film, you get a little more leeway, but it's still expensive to get an independent film released to any kind of audience if a profit margin is your goal. So it goes back to what we were talking about before. We need a different distribution method for film.
We've been having these I Spit on Your Grave remakes and sequels coming out last few years. They just get buried at Walmart. So
yeah, for some reason, specifically Walmart.
Can I just real quick just throw out and say, I remember going into Walmart, I don't know, what was 10 years ago, and going into the movie section and seeing the original I Spit on Your Grave on Blu-ray there for $10 going, what kind of amazing world do we live in now where this movie that was so buried in video stores is now right there on my Walmart shelf? Last House on the Left, when that remake came out, the original was prominently there. Walmart, Best Buy. I'm like, oh my god, look at
But
this.
yet, if you turn around and look at the CDs, you can't find uncensored music anywhere.
Right,
No.
right.
That was the dichotomy of Walmart that always kind of struck me. It's like, if you're going to buy a rap CD or a metal CD, it's going to be the clean version because Walmart don't sell that trash. But you
Right.
could turn around and you could buy I Spit on Your Grave on Blu-ray. It's
Exactly.
like, it's either way, guys. You know what I mean? You're selling me a weird message here, and I don't understand what it is.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Don't worry, we have a book in the next aisle over from media that actually condones slavery and genocide. So whatever. in every Walmart.
But hey, there are no fucks on that rap CD, so you're good.
Correct.
Yes, yes.
Well, what I want to talk about is it kind of is an extension of what we were talking about just now. And I don't know if you guys are familiar with oh geez, what's his podcast? Long white-haired guy directed a bunch of Mick Garris. Mick Garris's podcast. He had Frank Darabont on recently, and Frank Darabont was talking about how he wrote a script based on a Stanley Kubrick treatment, Civil War film. He got Ridley Scott attached to produce it, and no studio in Hollywood would touch it. And he blamed, I don't want to say he blamed comic book movies, but he basically said studios want a product and not a movie. And I think that's very true. I think that's where we've been for a long time. They want the safe bet. They want the Big Mac. You go to McDonald's and you buy a Big Mac because you know it's going to taste like every Big Mac you've ever eaten before. It's going to taste good. It's going to make you feel good because it's full of chemicals designed to make you feel good. It's going to fill you up for about 2 or 3 hours. Then you're going to be hungry again, and you're going to completely forget about that Big Mac. That's what most movies, I think, kind of are today. Especially you get into these, every movie's got to be a $500 million franchise piece or a part of a
Film universe.
It's got to be part of a film universe. It's got to be part of a film franchise. It's got to have a brand name. It's got to have brand recognition, like Levi's, Nike, Adidas, Coca-Cola. That's what we want in the theaters. That's why you don't see new movies in the theaters from David Lynch. That's why he went back to TV. Even Frank Darabont in that interview said, all the television is now where like the best writers have gone. That's where you get the freedom to kind of make what you want is in television, not in film anymore. Go ahead, Cal. I'm sorry.
No, I was just gonna say that wasn't that the mantra of Friday the 13th back in the 80s was like, we want to create the Big Mac where every year you get, the burger you like.
Right.
So every generation, there's that Big Mac series out there. So, but don't forget, Frank Darabont also adapted one of the biggest comics of all time in The Walking Dead. So he is part of it.
But I mean, there's the landscape was different then because you had the Friday the 13th. Studios back then, they had their big summer blockbusters, they had their Oscar bait movies. They did a little bit. They released like 5 movies a year, and they would cover all the categories. Big blockbuster, prestige picture. Here's your rom-com. Here's your whatever. Now it's like studios make 1 movie a year. They put $500 million in it, and it has to be a brand.
Yeah, everything could exist back then. There was a coexistence of all types of film back when Friday the 13th came out. You had your Chariots of Fire. You had your Friday the 13th Part 2. You had Gandhi, and then you had Nightmare on Elm Street. You had The Thing. You had E.T. You had all these things that coexisted, and they had their audiences, and their audiences were satisfied because there was something available. Now, the critics may have thought differently, but that's what critics do.
Well, what's the difference now, though, Mike, is that there were no cell phones. There were no, Atari was starting to come out, but everybody's got so busy with so many streaming channels, so many video games. the only movies people are going to see now are these comic book movies, and everything else gets to streaming because nobody else is going out.
So
And I also think over the past 2 decades, Hollywood has become extremely dependent on foreign markets.
Right.
So a lot of the films that they produce also have to be within the guidelines of what's acceptable in these foreign markets. And they'll go as far to release alternate cuts to different countries to remove things that might be considered offensive in those markets. So we have a watering down that began with the PG-13 rating, but has gotten far, far worse for more nefarious profit-driven reasons.
okay, no one's gonna like this, so just belt in. So everything was going swimmingly in the 70s, an extremely creative time for when I say adult cinema, you know what I mean. I'm not talking about pornography. Movies made for thinking adults. You can have films about cops on the beat that are hooked on drugs. You can have adaptations of Mario Puzo, and you can have Star Wars. But once you have Star Wars, and once you have Steven Spielberg's career really start, the bar gets raised on what the studios assume they need to do. And things still go kind of okay for the next, 12 years. Jurassic Park changes everything. Jurassic Park gave us Marvel. Jurassic Park gave us Fast and the Furious, which is why it's perfect that they're going to be the same franchise now. It's not that Jurassic Park is not a great film. It is, but it told Hollywood all the wrong lessons to learn. Now films have to appeal to your grandfather and your 12-year-old kid. And oh yeah, PG-13 is perfect, isn't it? Because we get to be edgy enough that the 13-year-old boy is still going to be talking about it on the playground, but he can still get into the movie. Spielberg, Landis, J.J. Abrams, these are along the timeline. These are the big pop artists of the decade. This is your Billy Joel. You might love Billy Joel. Don't get me wrong. I don't. You might. But there's a big friggin' difference between Billy Joel and The Clash. They both have something to say. One said it a lot louder and was a little bit more unpredictable on what that next album was going to sound like. You pretty much, except when Billy Joel put out that shitty classical record, you knew what you're getting from him. So I feel like we embraced things like, again, you might love them, Jaws, Close Encounters of the Third Kind, and especially E.T. E.T. is a big landmark on the dumbing down of our culture. Because after that, everything for kids wanted to be E.T. until Iron Man came out. So be careful what you wish for and what you support with your dollars. Next time something comes out that looks edgy as hell, go see it. Travel further than you normally do. And don't say, I'll just wait for streaming because it's easier. The only way this gets turned around is with money being made, because the studios don't respond to anything else.
Yeah. Well, and I don't want anybody to think that I hate Marvel or any of those movies. I just wish there were other movies to go watch instead of Marvel movies, or instead of DC movies, or instead of Star Wars movies, or instead of, again, the here's the kids meal, here's the Whopper, you know what I mean? Here's your whatever. And I think we could live in a world where there's all those things plus original properties, where there's the Halloween films and the next Friday the 13th films and the Nightmare on Elm Street reboots and all that jazz with original horror stuff. But again, I mean, you have to go out and support it. Or, 2018, we've mentioned this in the past, you had Halloween 2018 and then you had Hellfest, and everybody saw Halloween 2018. Nobody saw Hellfest. So the studio's like, well, let's make more Halloweens.
I'm just afraid that it might already be too late and all the interesting stuff has already been relegated to streaming. Mm-hmm. And all we're going to get in the theater, especially coming out of the lockdown, is going to be the safe bet.
Mm.
I think the tide is slowly turning on the superhero stuff. Recently, a lot of people have been complaining. I'm not qualified. I actually do hate Marvel and DC at this point. I could care less. But I don't know. I'm not seeing those same glowing reviews I saw for Avengers and some of this stuff. I think they're doing a lot of things that are shooting themselves in the foot in terms of trying to hammer political points home into people's heads that I don't know. I think we might be seeing the beginning of that lessening a little bit.
Dan, I've been hearing that argument for 12 years now. They said now's the time it's going to happen, and then the next one comes out and it makes $200 million.
All right.
Well,
look at
lots
this phase.
changed.
Look at this phase 4 stuff. I mean, like, there's none of that is like. Who's heard of any of that stuff? I mean, you know,
the Black Panther film will do well when it comes out.
I'm sure. Yeah, I'm sure it will.
Right. And by well, I mean well by Marvel standards. But they're fooling themselves if they think the Eternals is going to do what Guardians of the Galaxy did 10 years ago.
Yeah, well, I mean, a lot of those.
That's what they're expecting. But it's not. The one place I'm going to disagree with Dan is it's not about the messaging. It's the writing.
Yeah.
So the problem again goes back to. If you're making a film for a 72-year-old grandfather and also making it for a 12-year-old great-great-grandson, you're writing pretty dumb, pretty broad. Mm-hmm. So that's the problem. You could make that same film. Maybe the Black Widow film is great. I don't know. From the trailer, it looks pretty generic to me. But if they decide to make that film for, hey, you know what? Let's go for 25 to 30-year-olds as the audience. And so these are the cultural references that these people would be into. Now you're cutting your audience down, and that's what they will not do, but you'd make a better film for someone.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know. I hope that things are going to change. And I don't know, again, you know, I think people have said that about the Marvel stuff, but this phase 4 stuff to me is just like, even if you're a hardcore fan, I mean, there just doesn't seem to be that buzz around these movies like there were even, you know, Captain Marvel and the first Black Panther film and stuff like that.
Marvel was kind of like this long, like TV series movie, and Endgame was the finale. Like,
right, exactly.
So people kind of feel like it's over.
Right.
You know. Yeah. I've told this story before, so I apologize. But a couple times, I actually met Frank Darabont at a Fangoria, and I joked with him once. I said, "Listen, was the reason why George Lucas fired you off writing the 4th Indiana Jones movies because you wanted to put Short Round back in it?" And he said, no, what happened was I wanted to create a story and George just wanted spectacle. And so I got the boot. And that pretty much said it all.
I think, and according to this interview with Mick Garris, Darabont basically said he's done. He's like, you know, I'm tired of all the stress and the deadlines and putting all this work into projects that just don't happen. He's like, I'm getting paid well, but at the end of the day, it's like, you know, you put your heart and soul into this stuff, and somebody who thinks they know more than you that don't are like, yeah, we're not going to do anything with it. Or, you know, change this, make this, do that, you know, and your vision gets, you know, degraded into their vision.
He wrote and directed he may not have been credited, but he wrote and directed every episode of season 1 of The Walking Dead. And then he was on pre-production on season 2 premiere, and the network just booted him out.
Yeah.
So,
well, one thing that was interesting about when I was talking to Patrick Lussier about Dracula 2000 and how the Weinsteins chipped away at his original vision for the film until they eventually got their vision. They kept chipping away at his until, like, eventually he realized, well, crap, my vision's completely gone, and now it's completely theirs. I'm making their movie now, not mine. But I thought it was interesting how over time and through rewrites and drafts, they got what they wanted, but they just did it very incrementally, very slowly chipping away at him. I mean, that's some devious stuff, man.
Well, that's the Weinsteins.
Yeah, I think they have a reputation for that. I think in hindsight, people look back and go, oh, that was their game. Yeah, they were pretty notorious.
But didn't Patrick Lussier direct the whole trilogy? Didn't he direct like Dracula 3000? Didn't he come back and do the other ones?
I know he did the first 2. I don't know about the third one.
Okay, but he did the second one.
Yeah.
So
he was like, they let me do whatever I wanted on that one because I was shooting it in Bulgaria for $3.
Did he mention the fact that like it was it was like really twisting Wes Craven's arm to put Wes Craven Presents on that. Craven didn't want to put his name on it until the Weinsteins like contractually forced him to put his name on Dracula 2000.
What I remember, I asked him if Craven was like any kind of buffer between him and the Weinsteins, and he said, well, Craven at one point was setting up, I forget what movie it was. I think it was Pulse, when he was going to direct that Pulse Americanized version. He started working on that, and that took him away from Dracula. And then of course Pulse didn't happen and whatever.
Right.
But
Dracula 2000, was that the one with Coolio?
no, that was Dracula 3000.
Oh.
That
Oh
was
man.
Dracula 3000.
I was gonna say I don't feel as bad for Patrick now, but if that was the one, I'd be like, dude, you should have walked. There's no fucking way my name is gonna be on this piece of shit. There's no way. That movie is embarrassing.
Frank Darabont, he's directed a lot of classy films, but I mean, he did co-write Dream Warriors, The Blob, and then he's directed almost every like Stephen King adaptation except for The Majestic. I think the only movie he's directed is not a Stephen King adaptation.
Yeah. Oh goodness, lot of interesting topics tonight. Some great reviews. It's been a really fun, interesting show tonight. Let's do some shout outs here. Let's talk for a minute. Thank you for tuning in tonight. The Daily Ghost, my buddy Keith, Captain Halloween. There's Dave Vanderhoff from Jersey. Horrid Films, hello. Brian Trash, what's up? Big Crack Rock, what's going on, Big Crack Rock? Sean McManus. Robert Long, Orc. Hope you're doing well, Orc. Let's see who else was with us tonight. I know I saw DJ Donnelly earlier. DJ, if you're still here, how's it going, buddy? Darren Burrows, hello. Mike, the real Fifth Beatle. Hope you're doing well. Well, let's see what's going on the Flesh Wound Features YouTube channel, Dan.
Oh well, we have tons of new reviews up. We'll have Quiet Place 2 coming tomorrow, I believe. Lots of Vinegar Syndrome stuff. Yeah, we're adding stuff every couple days.
Very cool. Yeah, you guys are pretty active over there for sure. Yeah. What's going on your channel, Lauren?
On Wednesday, the 2nd, 8 p.m., we have Tim Wagoneer joining me and Sam for the hour. Tim is a great horror writer. He just won a Stoker Award last week for best short form nonfiction. It's a great piece about the horror genre. But he's been a great novelist for a couple decades, kind of fighting the good fight through the changing landscape. So he should have some fascinating stories because he's been a part of basically every big motion in the last 2 decades in horror publishing. So he's a really a great guest and a great person, period. But that'll be exciting. The rest of the slate for June will be announced very shortly. We have some really cool stuff. I just got to make sure 100% it's happening before I, announce, because I get terrified about this stuff. But there will be the return of the game shows, sort of, on my channel, with a big-ass twist.
Oh, do you have to cut off digits for every answer you get wrong?
I haven't discussed that with other participants yet, but no spoilers.
Okay.
There will be blood, though, right, Lauren?
There's always blood.
There you go. What's going on the Obnoxious and Anonymous channel, Cam?
Honestly, I'm just kind of working my way through the watch-alongs of the original series of Twin Peaks to get ready for my film that I'm getting there. It's like I have basically about 9 days left of like real work on it, and spread that over 2 hours a day. That I'm available, probably about another month or so, but then it's gonna come together real quick when I'm very happy because it's taken me over a year to do this with the pandemic and all that stuff. I still got to do ADR with the actors, but it's gonna be amazing when it's done. I've seen some previs of some of the stuff we're doing, and wow, it's gonna be worth it, I think. So,
cool. What's going on with you, Stone?
Oh, well, I've started doing anniversary commentaries on my channel. I had 2 very successful ones. One for the Abominable Dr. Fives. Steak Sauce joined me for that one. That was a total success. As well as Escaping the Planet of the Apes with my old friend Scott Michael Bosco, who, by the way, did all the audio commentaries on the Scream Factory Omen set. But he's very, very knowledgeable. He's an awesome guy. I also did the commentary for Watch from the Woods with him, which is available as Patreon exclusive. And I'd like to close with just the best news of the day, which hasn't been mentioned yet. Terry Silver will be back for season 4 of Cobra Kai.
I heard.
Yay!
You can
I'll
tell
watch it in a couple decades.
you're missing out on a lot of fun. Lot of fun.
But that's. I'm glad you guys love it, and it seems to be really successful. I just never liked the Karate Kid movie, so I can't imagine me liking this.
I understand.
You don't
understand.
really. I'm going to be
You
honest
don't
with you.
have to.
I don't think you have to like the Karate Kid movies. I think you can.
don't.
It's just a
You
good
don't.
redemption story.
But also on a meta level, it's a redemption story for William Zabka, who really needed to be working a lot more over the last 20 years because he
Way
is
more.
he's a phenomenal actor.
Yeah, he's awesome.
You should
What's
win
going on with you, Mike?
Well, my personal project is still a work in progress and shall remain that for the foreseeable future. But as Stone mentioned earlier, I'll be doing a commentary on Eyes of a Stranger with him on Monday. I don't know if that's going to be live or recorded and released later, but we're going to do it Monday, and that's going to be a good time. And I'll be on the next Obscurity Report on Lauren's channel, whenever that is, sometime coming up. I look forward to that. Another a great obscure flick that I'm looking forward to talking about. And of course, I'll be on this show and doing editing behind the scenes, and my personal life keeps me busy enough as it is, so I've got a full plate.
Right on. Cool. Very cool. Well, tonight at 11:30 in an hour, I'm going to be doing a live stream leading up to the halfway to Black Friday Vinegar Syndrome sale, the reveal of the surprise titles, seeing everything, seeing what all is half off, and that should be fun. So head over to my channel around 11:30.
Piz, sorry to interrupt. Do you have any predictions
Predictions?
for the sale?
Not really. I mean, I've heard a few things, but I don't want to throw them out there because I don't know for sure and come off, sounding stupid. Like, yeah, it's going to be, Hunter's blood, and then it's like, something completely different. You know what I mean? They're like, I swear on a Bible, it's going to be Scanner Cop, and then it's like, Psycho Cop, which I'd be super happy for anyway. Give me Psycho Cop over Scanner Cop anyway.
Well, props to Blue Underground for getting Alan Smithy to do a commentary for the upcoming Maniac Cop 3. That's a get.
I would love.
That dude's directed a lot of films.
I would love to get Mr. Smithy on my channel. I'd love to get him on my channel. Be awesome. But I am going to have Brad Henderson from Vinegar Syndrome on my channel on Monday the 31st. At 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time to talk all things Vinegar Syndrome and acquiring titles and all that fun stuff. So, all right. Thanks again for tuning in, everybody. It was a lot of fun. Thank you all. Please, smash the like button before you take off. Again, if you would like to have hours of exclusive content, follow us or check out our Patreon. And until next time, have a good one. We'll see you soon. Take care and peace.
vanished.